3 minutes after 10. Good morning. Some days, honestly, did you know that the major rolling news channels on the telly, which you probably haven't noticed because you're too busy waiting for me to start blathering, are currently both leading on the fact that a television presenter has gone back to work this morning and has read out a statement which is breaking news. The BBC just crossed live to ITV to find out what the television presenter was saying on her first day back at work since her colleague resigned in disgrace. I don't know anymore. Do you? Anybody? I was going to open this morning by saying it's quite a slow news day, and by that I simply mean that there is no overarching story that demands our attention like there is on many mornings. The COVID inquiry shenanigans have moved on a little bit. The Cabinet Office is reportedly threatening to remove the money that Boris Johnson is taking off the taxpayer to pay for his legal advice if he carries on causing problems for them in the media. I said to you on Friday, be very careful on the language with Boris Johnson. You report that he is handing over all of his WhatsApps. Much wiser, I think, to report that he says he is handing over all of his WhatsApps. And then the distinct whiff of fish that should accompany his every pronouncement becomes a little harder to ignore. So that's around. I know that we live in a state of constant climate crisis and various other issues, but I just don't know anymore. I mean, I couldn't get the story to sing for love nor money. I'm quite good at this gig, but no, I can't do another conversation about why on earth has this story about a programme that's often watched by fewer people than listen to this one. Although I appreciate I'm not comparing eggs with eggs. I'm comparing apples with pears. But there it is. I mean, there's probably no one listening. Everyone's tuned into various television news channels in order to watch them cross live to daytime television, where a presenter, the big story of the day is that a presenter has gone back to work after a couple of weeks off. I didn't, to my shame and embarrassment, I didn't recognise the co-presenter sitting alongside the presenter who's gone back to work after a couple of weeks off, but I'm reliably informed that's the head of HR over at ITV, just keeping a close eye on proceedings in the studio after recent experiences. I'll tell you what's more important than that. What's more important than that is making ends meet. And making ends meet suddenly became a heck of a lot harder for a lot of people. When we talk about mortgages, I have various sort of plates spinning in my mind. One of the largest of which is the knowledge that in the years that I've been doing this programme, and I think I've got an anniversary coming up next year. I think it might be 20 years in January. But anyway, I know what you're thinking. Crikey, must have been 8 when you started. I was very young. I was a particularly young debutante on LBC. But I think it's 20. It's either next January or the one after. Anyway, over the years I have been doing this show, it has been remarkable to watch the disappearance of property presumption, is what I would call it. The moving of the goalpost, the moving of the spotlight, the cohort of people, the percentile of people who would reasonably expect to be getting onto the property ladder by, let's just say, their 30th birthday as a relatively arbitrary milestone in life. And then possibly as we spent more and more time together, we moved it along and we may have opened it up to the 35th or even the 40th birthday. But it continues to move. And I sit here today absolutely certain that if we were able to count such things in any scientific fashion, the percentage of people listening to this programme who reasonably expected to be mortgagees or property owners in the first half of their lives is considerably smaller than it was when we started. It's one of the I think the first generation perhaps that is less likely to be a homeowner than their parents. We've been tracking it for some time. So I am aware of that plate, and I certainly don't want to stop it spinning, or if that plate describes you, I certainly don't want you to feel excluded from the conversation today. I'm also a bit of a doofus when it comes to matters fiscal. I'm not proud of that. I used to be one of those people who thought it was cool not to cool to claim not to be good at maths, which was stupid for 2 reasons. I am quite good at maths, actually. And the second reason is, what a stupid thing to be proud of. I thought it made you less arty, less intellectual, you know? Oh no, I'm more of a Shakespeare man myself. More Shakespeare than Pythagoras. But it's just stupid. If you want to know why it's stupid, just listen to Martin Lewis on the subject of why we should be teaching children in school the basic skills of personal financial management. It changes everything. The amount of money that you have probably set fire to in your life without even realising because you weren't aware of things that you could and should be doing. So I am embarrassed to tell you that I'm not fully au fait with, for example, the impact of signing a 35-year mortgage as opposed to a 20-year one, except the rather obvious observation that it means you'll be paying more money for longer, although in the short term you'll be paying less every month. So I can see why that's attractive. This is one of the weirdest things about being a human being. God, we've gone deep quite early this morning. One of the weirdest things about being a human being is our failure really to have a proper grasp of time. How many times have I said to you that the big difference between you, me and an aristocrat is generational consciousness? Actually, I've never said that to you before because I've never actually put it into a pithy phrase, generational consciousness. But the principle behind the phrase generational consciousness is of enduring fascination to me. The idea that you and I think about, at the very least, maybe getting to the end of our own lives and what we're going to have left to leave to our children, right? If you're lucky enough to have a quid and lucky enough to have a kid, kids and quids, covering all the bases today. But for really wealthy people, they're thinking generations ahead. Like royal family, not just royal family, but dukes, aristocrats. Always think of trees at this point. You know I do. I know it's weird, but it really helps. You look out your window now, and you know that in 200 years' time, your great-great-great-grandchild will be looking out the same window as the owner of the same chateau or the owner of the same stately home. So why not plant some oak trees now, knowing that in 200 years' time, they'll be enjoyed by your descendants? Are you going to do that? Stick an oak tree in the front garden of our semis? I don't think so. It's not going to happen. So they think differently about things and they think differently about money. And we don't, because our ancestors didn't have any. You know, it's only relatively recently that property ownership became a thing at all. So when they say, oh, you can pay 200 quid a month for 50 years, or you can pay 500 quid a month for 20 years, I should have done the sums actually before I used this example, shouldn't I? Even though you'll be paying a hell of a lot more in total over 50 years than you would be over 20, you think, oh, well, that's quite attractive because I'll still have lots of money left over for the bingo. I'll still have plenty of cash left over for the for my gym membership or my avocado habit or whatever, or my Netflix subscription or whatever it may be. So I don't think we're very clever sometimes. And of course, you live in a country that's dedicated really to entrenching inequality and promoting the interests of wealth. Guess who's got a story on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today? By people who call it doctors, but doctors of financial research, not doctors of immunology. Or you read it, this thing about, oh, bad lockdown bad. And you get to the end, Institute of Economic Affairs. Like night follows day. And there's the Daily Telegraph, bending the knee. If you want to understand viruses, virology, the best people to go to are secretly funded right-wing think tanks. I've often thought that to myself. Hopefully the sarcasm emoji is writ large over the programme this morning. But I look at the financial implications of the latest movements with regard to mortgage rates, and I just wonder what it means. I wonder how grateful I should be that I'm all right for a couple of years, but by nature of what we negotiated last year, it means people will still be paying off their deals well into their 70s. Now, think about that for a minute. That means you can't retire, really, doesn't it? It means you're going to have to carry on working beyond the retirement age. It's 35-year mortgage. And this isn't just, it is largely first-time buyers. 1 in 5 first-time buyers signing up to mortgages of more than 35 years. Because interest rates have stayed, again, it's all relative, isn't it? But interest rates are higher than we've been used to for many, many years. And therefore, you sign these incredibly long deals and accrue thousands of pounds more debt on the interest over the lifetime of the mortgage. I would like you to tell me what is going on in yours. 03456060973. You can be a clever clogs and do an overview, do a step back from the picture. What does it mean for society in general? Or you can do the micro analysis and just tell me what it means for you. 19% of all loans taken out by first-time buyers in March were for terms of more than 35 years. Now, pay attention just for a minute. In December 2021, when interest rates started heading north, that was 9%. So it's more than doubled in fewer than 2 years, in that 18-month period. 2% of mortgages in 2005 were taken out at that level. So there's the 35-year mortgage and what that means. And then there is, that's a very rude text someone sent me, which I can't possibly read out on the radio, but it made me chuckle so much. I just want to acknowledge that I did actually receive it, about oak trees and semis. 13 minutes after 10 is the time. I want you to tell me what is happening in your world with regard to your mortgage and what it's likely to mean beyond that simple envelope, beyond that simple calculation. I mean, are people thinking about handing the keys back yet? Are people having to redraw their financial situations completely? Where are you saving the money that you now need to find to spend the mortgage? What does it say about the housing market in general? And crucially, I think, what's it going to do to the nation, to the economy? You'll be passing a mortgage on to your children, won't you? Or something. I just sense that we're in largely uncharted waters. And I think today it would be remiss of us not to try to at least chart them a little bit. 0345 60 60973 is the number that you need. The question really is whatever you want it to be, because it's whatever is most urgent to you is going to be defined by the situation in which you find yourself. That's one angle of it. The other is this: more than 100,000 households face a squeeze on their finances this month because rates are going up. And if you're coming to renegotiate the end as you come to the end of your current deal, you could be in for a massive shock. Look, forewarned is forearmed. I'm sorry about this. I'm going to use you in a way to make sure other people are aware of what might be on the horizon. Santander made changes over the weekend. TSB has just withdrawn all of its 10-year fixed rate deals on Friday with 2.5 hours notice. The Coventry Building Society is increasing all its 2, 3 and 5-year deals tomorrow. The action is being driven by these inflation figures, which are worse than expected despite falling a little bit. And the difficulties here are obviously going to contribute to the cost of living crisis, which I would cautiously suggest is a little bit more important than the fact that a television presenter went back to work this morning after taking some time off to process the resignation of her former colleague in disgrace, although you'd be forgiven for understanding that by glancing at your television news this morning. So we've got the lowest ever levels of mortgage deals since March. You've got 100,000 households facing a squeeze on their finances. You've got lenders withdrawing deals or increasing rates, and you've got 1 in 5 first-time buyers now signing up for 35-year deals. I make no apology at all for asking you such a vague and broad question, but what does it all mean? What does it mean for you? 0345 6060 973. And what does it mean for all of us? 0345 6060 973. 19 minutes after 10 is the time. Is this true? Steve, if you're yanking my chain, I shall, I don't know what I'll do. I'll put you in idiot's corner for 10 minutes, although I may be too late by then. In Japan, mortgages are 99 years, James, and they're routinely passed on even to grandchildren. I'm always interested in what happens in other countries. I think like not being aware of long-term financial planning or not doing any long-term financial planning, not looking beyond the boundaries of our own immediate experience is incredibly injurious to us. Why can't we do what other countries do in so many areas? I remember spending some time in Vienna and being staggered by how much of the housing stock was municipally owned still, and not, I mean, a bit like it used to be in this country, where there was no relationship between your socioeconomic status and your access to state-owned housing. But anyway, I'm looking at two angles, really. The first is the hugely long mortgage deals that people are signing up for. But the other is, what are the increases, the withdrawal of deals and the increase? If you're coming to the end of your term now, what does it look like? Because this is really where we would all, I think we'd be in a state of quite serious catastrophe if everybody's mortgage began and ended at the same time. Do you see what I mean? If everybody this week or this month was having to renegotiate their mortgage because their old deal had come to an end, we'd be in a state of pretty epic turmoil. But because you've got such a stagger in place, you know, depending on when it started, and depending on how long it was for, you're never really going to have a massive flood of people in exactly the same situation at exactly the same time. But the most interesting people today are the people coming to the end of their deal now and not quite believing what they're discovering when they go to find out what they're going to do next. That's probably more interesting, actually, than the 35, 40-year deals. But come one, come all. 21 after 10 is the time. Michael's in Bromley. Michael, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi there. So I'm a first-time buyer, and unfortunately, I'm also a first-time parent as well.
Gosh.
So I have to pay for a huge mortgage.
You say unfortunately, but there are joys. And yes, I hear you on that particular front.
Nursery costs are just absolutely ridiculous. So I have to pay for like a huge mortgage as well as, huge nursery costs as well. But I feel there's nothing that can be done, because if you don't get on the property ladder, it's just going to become more affordable, and you're basically going to spend your life renting forever. So at the moment, in my personal circumstances, I have to basically spend over £2,000 on my mortgage every single month, which is like basically 90% of my take-home pay.
Holy moly.
After expenses, when my missus pays for her childcare as well,
right,
we only have about £400 between us to spend every single month. And also that we need to pay for insurance and basically our living expenses.
What, food?
So, yeah, food and stuff, yeah.
So you're living on about £100 a week?
Basically, yeah.
As a family of three?
Yep.
As a consequence of having to shovel all that cash into your mortgage?
Yeah. So literally, I'm living on the breadline at the moment, but I feel there's nothing that can be done, because as a parent, I'd want to obviously live something for my younger ones.
No, I understand. I completely. No, Michael, I get it. I don't know what I'd do. I don't think I'd be as organised or as responsible as you in the same situation. But I completely understand the impulses and the motivations that drive you. Can I ask you? I don't want to be rude to other listeners, but can I ask you some of the slightly obvious and possibly silly questions that I will be texted about you in the next 5 minutes? Because we can save them 10pence at least by preempt. So why didn't you buy a cheaper house, a cheaper property?
Well, the thing is, unfortunately, in my circumstances, I have to live close to family, because if I live far away from London, I wouldn't be able to get the support that I need. And also, I need to take care of my family as well, because obviously they're old. So I'm put between a rock and a hard place in terms of, moving outside London and getting something a bit more cheaper, and not being able to be there for my parents who are a bit old. So I need to actually take care of them as well.
I think that's a perfect answer. Answer. What happens if you need a new boiler, or the car breaks down, or something like that? I don't imagine you've got a car, have you?
I have to be honest with you, I'll probably have to just get a credit card and get into debt.
Yeah.
That's the only way that I could be able to afford it, or maybe beg from family if they could help. But they're
well, what you could say to them, look, I stayed near. I stayed close by so I could look after you. The least you could do is buy me a new boiler. This is outrageous behaviour. I'm making light of what is clearly a very serious situation. How much of a burden does it put on you mentally? How conscious are you of working hard, earning good money?
Honestly, I think about money every single day.
Yeah.
It's always at the back of my mind. I have to pick up a second job to at least, so that we can actually go out a bit. Even going out, it costs money these days. And as a parent, I want my kids to actually enjoy life a bit. And cost of living crisis, even taking a bus, I have to think about that. I need to budget literally everything to the penny to make sure that we can actually stay above water every month. And as a parent, I think it's something you have to sacrifice in the long term, so that your kid can be able to hopefully have that generational wealth that we don't have at the moment. So,
did you really? Have you always been this responsible, or did becoming a father shift something quite profound inside you? If you don't mind me asking.
I think becoming a father actually made me more responsible, because I felt that I've got a dependent on me, and literally, if something happens to me right now, that my daughter wouldn't be able to actually have a good life that I would want her to live. So as a parent, it just makes me more responsible. And I personally don't really like debt, and I felt that if I kept on rent for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be able to actually retire properly.
Yeah,
I would always have to spend money on rent later for the rest of my life, and I'll become a burden onto my children. So
how old are you?
I am 34 at the moment.
34, and you've got a 35-year mortgage, so you'll be out of it.
Well into my I'm just praying that hopefully I can be able to maybe get a better salary when I advance in my career a bit, to hopefully make overpayments in my mortgage.
And that's
the only way I can be able to survive.
That was going to be my final question. I mean, according to your calculations, when will you be able to relax?
73 at the moment. Yeah, 73. So I'm probably going to work well into my 70s, unfortunately.
You should be proud of yourself, man. You're an example to fathers everywhere. You really are. But it's not fair, is it? This isn't how it's supposed to work.
Yeah, life is honestly, like, I really do envy the older generation that really had it cheap. But
they worked a lot harder than you, Michael. That's another one of the texts I'll be getting from Idiot's Corner in the next 5 minutes. You should cancel your Netflix subscription and eat fewer avocados, mate. Don't you read the Daily Telegraph? Anyone can buy a property at your age as long as they've inherited £250,000 from their grandma. That appears in paragraph 19 of the story on how I managed to buy a house despite only being in my 20s. I wish you well, mate. I hope that the relaxation date arrives at platform 2 a little sooner than is currently scheduled. And forgive my ignorance, but I know you can overpay. I don't know whether you can... if interest rates do come right down again, can you pay a penalty to come out of a 35-year mortgage? Is it a punitive penalty? Is it a penalty so high that you wouldn't even do it anyway? Or you'll be doing the old scales again? But my goodness me, I wish I... Well, no, I won't say that. It sounds a bit silly. I was going to say I wish I was as responsible as you when I was your age. I was just a lot luckier than you by dint of the generation I was born into. Thank you, mate, and good luck. Lee's in Sheffield. Lee, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
73, mate. 73. I'm reeling from that. Anyway, go on.
I know. I'm kind of looking at our building work that's starting, thinking that as well. We're in the point where we're doing some additional borrowing for our house, and you're selecting on the drop down what sort of term you put in. And my view on this was we went for the maximum term possible, which was 34 years and 1 month or something.
So the longer that just for the benefit of people who are not as clever as you and Michael and are a little bit closer to me when it comes to financial management, the longer you do, so you see the two numbers in conjunction, and the longer the term, the smaller the monthly payment.
Yep, exactly that. But the interest over the term,
well, of course,
bigger. But I suppose my view is, and you were kind of touching on it just towards the end of the call. Then is that I'm hoping my salary will increase as my career does.
Yes.
So I'm relatively early on in my career, and hopefully by the time I'm sort of in my 50s or 60s, my earnings would increase as well. And I think there really needs to be more emphasis on people overpaying their mortgage. And
is there any penalty when you overpay?
No, you can overpay up to a certain amount, but you're obviously tied in for like a 2-year or a 5-year fix. But no, most people will sort of renew. But I suppose my view is that rates will go down eventually, salaries will go up, hopefully, and then I won't need to be working until I'm 70.
So what happens then? So you sign up for a 34-year mortgage, but you're not signing up to the same interest rate for the next 34 years, or are you?
Yeah, that's right. No, only for 2 years or 5 years. And
then you come back to the market, as it were, and the rate is adjusted accordingly, but more at their discretion than yours, obviously. So you're not going to get, even in 4 years' time, you're not going to get the best available rate on the market, are you? I don't imagine, because you've signed up for 34 years.
I don't think the term, it really matters. It's more to do with your loan to value ratio. Okay. So if you're... if the value of your house compared to what you're borrowing is 90%, then you're not going to get a very competitive deal. Whereas if your loan to value rate is 60%, then you're going to get a slightly more competitive interest rate.
And this is where I just return to what Michael said for anybody who's even older than me, who doesn't quite get it on that question of the older generations having it much easier. I got 110% mortgage at a very, very favourable rate. That's what it was like 23 years ago. So the change, the difference between generations is absolutely epic. You're quite sanguine about it. Is that because, and I always think this is underestimated in conversations like this, that's because this is the only world you inhabit. You're not like me looking in the rearview mirror and comparing where you are in 2023 to where I was in 2000. This is the only world you inhabit, so you will make the best of it. And like Michael, you have decided that being a property owner is more important than any of the other considerations that come into play. This is just how it is, so you've got to make the best of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's no point looking in the past. You can't do anything about the past, but you can do something about the future. And with your previous caller, Michael, eventually he'll be a point where his children will be at school, and hopefully he won't have the burden of ridiculous nursery fees.
That's very true.
So again, hopefully people are sensible, and he might put some of that money aside to overpay his mortgage, and then hopefully he won't have to work till he's 73.
Well, I think we can all join in that hope. I mean, unless you love your job, but the idea that you would have to, that's the point, isn't it, Lee, there? Just casually undoing almost about 60 to 70% of right-wing media coverage by saying there's no point looking at the past. This lot never do anything else. It's incredible, but he's right. I mean, this is the world you inhabit. It doesn't matter what deal your parents got or what deal your grandparents got. It would be nice if they just shut up about how your lot have got it all so easy for a while, but these are different universes. Good grief. Good grief. 31 minutes after 10. What's your story? 0345 606 0973. Lottie Morley's here now with your headlines. 10:34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. There's a however halfway through this text, and it was a however that made my heckles. Is it the heckles that rise or the hackles that rise? What? Hackles, hockles, chuckles? But wrongly, because Nick in Caterham makes a good point. He says, I feel a lot of sympathy with people trying to buy property now. It's tougher than ever. However, I don't think people should be so scared of long-term mortgages. I've always worked on the principle that you rarely pay off a mortgage at full term. That's very true, actually. Mostly you sell up mid-term. As long as property continues to be a good investment, this is okay. We've just seen property prices fall for pretty much the first time in living memory, but I don't think anyone is expecting that to be the new trend. And he concludes, I don't think overpaying the mortgage makes any sense until you've decided to settle permanently in the house you are in. I do understand it all seems scary, though. I disagree with the last bit. I think you want to get as much equity as you can, really, unless you're an absolute genius and you've calculated that you're better off having a debt here than there. And I just, as a relatively straightforward fella, I just think the more of it that you own, the more money you get when you move, even though, as Nick quite rightly says, hardly anyone ever moves having paid off in full the last mortgage. Daniel's in Romford. Daniel, what would you like to say?
Hello there, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Right, so I'm 40 years old now. In my 20s, I abandoned the idea of ever owning a house. My parents lived in a council house. Fast forward to about 35, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to fall into a job where I'm earning in excess of 40k after tax, after expenditure.
So you're doing better than you expected to?
Exactly.
Okay.
So me and my partner decided last year we'd apply
for a mortgage. Are you a bailiff?
Sorry?
What are you, a bailiff?
No, I'm a multi-trade engineer for...
Oh, crikey, yes, skills.
A big company in the city.
Lovely stuff.
So fast forward to 35, got this job, decided to apply for a mortgage, got approved after years of building up my credit score, etc.
Yeah.
Me and my partner saved a 5% deposit. We applied to Halifax. They agreed the mortgage, and the very next day that the mortgage was agreed, they pulled all the 5% mortgages off the market.
Wow.
So we were so close. We were on such a knife edge to that mortgage. All it would have took was the bank manager to have left the documents on his desk for one more day, and then that would have been the end of that.
But you snuck in.
Yeah, we snuck in. So we moved into the house in February, looking through the details of the mortgage. I'm 40 now. The mortgage is for 32 years till I'm 72. It's stated in the mortgage as well that for every £1.91 that I pay off my mortgage, only £1 of that goes towards the actual property. So 91 pence of that is interest. So now I'm at 40 years of age and starting a mortgage. Obviously, it's not ideal to be 40 and starting a mortgage, but there we are.
But you'd rather be here than not.
Yes, so it just means that,
isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've got 32 years of working hard. Hopefully the strategy for me is to extend on the side, add some equity to the property, 10, 15 years. Every 2 years that my mortgage ends, the fixed rate ends, is to try and pay off a lump sum after them 2 years and see if I can get that mortgage down from 32 years, hopefully, to 25. Would be nice.
How would you describe yourself? Because in terms of financial management, are you quite on it? Are you quite...
Yes.
Yeah, you sound it. You all do,
yes,
actually.
So in my 20s, 30s, not so much.
Right.
I got to 35 and had to start being responsible, as most people do. It got to a point where now, like, my finances are literally, if I look at something and I think that's an impulse buy, I don't buy it. So now I've got this strategy. It means that, I mean, my mortgage is in excess of £1,800 a month at the moment. And when I moved into this property, to give you an idea of how much of a contrast it was from renting before, I was renting before. It's that I had over 7k in the bank savings when I moved in February, and I'm now down to £500, having to use my savings to cover my mortgage. So there is a deficit at the moment, and there is.
What are you going to do?
Well, it gets to the point where the more it squeezes, the more you've got to look at stuff like phone bills.
Also, you've got expenses by dint of having just moved into a new place that are one-off payments, aren't they? You've kitted it out and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. So I mean, we've moved into this property now. I've just managed to save £130 a month on my two phone contracts for me and my partner.
Wow.
So I mean, when you look at stuff like that, I mean, when you really dig deep over the space of years, when you don't have a mortgage, you don't look at the long term, you look at the short term savings. But once you get a mortgage, you start looking at that's £15 a month, that's £10 a month.
And you're thinking over that you're thinking that over 32 years.
Yeah.
Aren't you? Given what you've
absolutely,
of course, that's such a sensible way of thinking about it.
I think I worked it out that with my savings on my mobile contracts now, over the space of 30 years, I'll be saving £42,000.
That's a really good way of thinking. That's the opposite of what I call the coffee principle. When that's when I used to buy coffee for the whole team every morning when I was coming into work, and then I added up how much I was spending every year, and I thought, flipping out, let's make it weekly. Yeah. If that, or actually, let's talk to the boss and get it free. So when you do these calculations, sometimes it's staggering, isn't it? What you just do, as you say, it's a brilliant way of putting it. When you're living to the end of the month, you're living month to month. You don't think twice about it. I'll drop that on dinner, or I'll get a fancy new phone. But if you're thinking about a 32-year stretch, then you're looking at everything completely differently.
That's exactly right.
Is it stressful? I just, why I asked that question. I thought the last caller nailed down the fact that, well, this is just what it is. What it is, James. This is the world that we live in. It might be very different from the world that you lived in when you got a mortgage, but I've got no choice. I can't get in a time machine. But is there a stress there when you look at the length of time involved and the figures?
So it puts you under constant pressure.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say. And the way I look at it is the last 4 years, building up to this mortgage, saving the deposit, my stress levels have ramped quite significantly from 4 years ago till now. So it's like, bring on the stress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You just think to yourself, at the end of the day, I'm in this now. I won't get another opportunity. If I default on this mortgage, I dare say I would not ever be eligible for another one. So it's now or never, do or die.
Yeah, good for you. And well, good luck anyway. And don't forget to look after yourself, Daniel. I know it can sound a bit woo sometimes, but the mindfulness and the mental health side of things, there's lots of ways of reducing the stress, even if you can't reduce the things that you're stressing about. That's the crucial point, it often seems to me. Thank you, mate, and good luck. Nick's in Croydon. Nick, what made you pick up the phone?
Yeah, hiya, James.
Hello,
I'm a mortgage broker, and I've got a mortgage. So I thought, maybe I can help on a couple of fronts. And we spoke before a long time ago, and we ended up with capitalism with a conscience. I don't know if you...
Yeah, vaguely. But just that idea that at some point we may talk about universal basic income later in the programme, so that would fit in neatly as well. Before you start, how's business as a mortgage broker?
Yeah, I mean, look, I really didn't want to come on and kind of talk about me and my business.
No,
because
but it was the first thing you mentioned.
For us.
It was the first thing you mentioned. So I just want to know, how is business at the moment?
It's very, very tricky. I mean, we're in a situation where if you don't do something today, things are going to be different tomorrow. And that just ramps up the pressure on everybody.
Well, Daniel just proved it, didn't he? I mean, literally, if his bank manager had sat still for 24 hours, he'd have lost the deal that he was offered.
And that's it. And that's how it is. And that's the life of a mortgage broker at the moment. It's kind of saying to people, look, you need to do this now, because if you don't do it today, things will be different tomorrow. And that's being proved over and over again. And where's it going to stop as far as this base rate? So, I would expect to see a couple more in it, to be honest with you, if we're talking about base rate rises.
And what are you doing then? What is the kind of, I guess what we're talking about today is two things. We've touched on the first. The second is the to my generation, shocking notion of a 35 or a 40-year mortgage. As a mortgage broker, at the coalface, dealing with people like my first three callers today, it's that way or the highway. There's no option here. What's your attitude to that?
It is. I agree with that. Actually, I've always said to first-time buyers, look, if you can, set the term for as long as you can, because that's going to be your monthly commitment. And if the pandemic showed us anything, it's that you want to make what you're committed to as low as possible, because most lenders will allow you to overpay outside of that repayment normal term, up to 10% of the balance each year. So you could, and this isn't advice because everyone's different.
Of course, and we're not allowed to give financial advice on the radio.
So we're staying away from that. But what I say to the younger people is, time is so tough at the moment. You may as well set your mortgage term to make that commitment as low as possible. If that's allowing you to save and put money in an ISA that you do every year, you could at the end of that year go, right, I will pay off that part of my mortgage. Or if the pandemic showed us, oh my God, we need that money now to live on or something else. So you're just putting yourself, in my opinion, in a bit more control.
How old are you?
I'm 43.
Okay, so you're 10 years, give or take, younger than me. Last caller was 40, before that 30s. There's a generational thing going on here. The Daily Mail knows what it's doing. It's publishing a front page that is going to spook its old age pensioner readership. And that's, for once, not an insult to the Daily Mail, certainly not an insult to old age pensioners. This story is staggering because it's so different from what we were used to. It's not staggering to you.
No, not at all. But there is good news. I want to try and pump some good news into it because
good luck.
I'm in the investment market with mortgages.
Okay.
So what I see is that the investment market is becoming less attractive, which means that there's going to be less demand, less of your landlords buying the properties up.
Yeah.
And that creates room for first-time buyers and new buyers. Now what we really need is a complete industrial plan, loads of houses, because the problem that no one's talking about, or we haven't today, is this is a simple problem of supply and demand.
Yes.
We don't have enough houses in this country.
No, I hear you, but the rationale for taking out these incredibly long mortgages is that they will increase in value throughout the duration of time. So it's a tricky machine, isn't it? It's a tricky one to calibrate and to fine tune, because you have too much supply, the value comes down, and people who've got 35-year mortgages are staring into an abyss.
Well, not necessarily the 35-year mortgage, but you'll remember a few days ago, a lender came out, I won't say the name, we're doing 100% mortgages again.
Yes.
In you come. Now, they're the people who would have the problem.
Yes.
Because suddenly their value of their home drops because we built the 2 million homes we need. So all those people in the high loans of value have pumped it and really worked hard to get there. Then they build a load of houses, all the house prices drop. And, is that part of the reason why they don't build a load of houses? Because who owns all the property?
Yes, of course it is. I think that's a big elephant in the room whenever we have this conversation. If I owned a swathe of land, I can build on it now and make X £1,000, or I can build on it in 5 years' time and make X 10 times £10,000. Of course I'm not going to build on it now. There's difference between the way most of us think financially, except when it comes to mortgages, oddly, which is, getting over the next hill, as opposed to the way that wealth and capital think, which is why Nick refers to the idea of a capitalism with a conscience last time we spoke. Capital and wealth, whether it's inherited or corporate, they're thinking usually much, much further ahead, unless, of course, they're at the sort of asset stripping side of things. 10:47 is the time now. It's 10 to 11. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So, first caller actually knocked the stuffing out of me, or pulled the rug from under my feet, or I don't know, whatever figure of speech you prefer. And yet, as the conversation has continued, Michael's experience became less and less remarkable. I find these things so interesting. I'm not a newspaper person. It's where I started my career, but I am the son of a newspaper person, and I'm fascinated by the influence they have on society, diminishing in many ways and yet still a stranglehold in others. I've been writing about it all weekend. And it is sometimes important to recognise that what they tell us matters doesn't necessarily matter for the reasons that they tell us why it matters. So today's front page stopped me in my tracks. Record demand for 35-year mortgages as rates keep rising. But they're in the business of spooking us and scaring us or shocking us. At least they're not trying to turn you against refugees today. I'm sure they'll get back to that tomorrow. Or attacking single mothers, or environmental protesters. This is meant to just scare us a little bit more obliquely. But it is what it is. I know that's a terrible phrase. I should stop saying it. The people who are actually living through this are not comparing it to what other people were living through 20, 30 or even 40 years ago, 50 years ago. That is what the deal is now, and you will make the most of it or the best of it in the way that we did. Feel free to challenge me on that. Feel free to tell me to wind my neck in and check my privilege. But that is what I'm hearing from people who are in the middle of it, rather than on the outside looking in from a position of much more luck, which I think I am. 10:52 is the time. Serena is in Brixton. Serena, what would you like to say?
I'm one of the lucky individuals whose fix is coming to an end, and interest alone, I'm going to be paying £950 extra on top of what I'm already paying every single month.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was overpaying a bit because I didn't work during COVID, and I took a 6-month break, so I was a bit behind, so I was overpaying by a few £100, but I've got to find the rest.
And this is simply because you're coming to the end of your term, and all that's available now is much more expensive than what was available last time. Did you know it was coming?
Yeah, yes. I keep an eye on these matters, so yeah, I'm not surprised. But it's a bit of a shock how much it's jumped. But the thing that worries me is where it's going to go. I had a look at the statistics. I think it was Office National Statistics Housing Survey, and it said now the relative proportion of people with mortgages is much lower than people who own outright. So when they turned the screw on us, on mortgage holders before, to reduce inflation, many more people had mortgages than have now. I got mortgage age 25 originally. We don't have 25-year-olds coming along. We don't have as many people. No,
but we've got a much older population. I don't know how many of them will still be paying mortgages or how many of them have paid it off, because that will be crucial as well.
They're not going to be affected directly by these increases. So if the mortgage rates have to keep going up and up and up to get the same effect, there are fewer of us that can work on, because fewer people have mortgages relative to all the people who own outright. So that's what scares me.
It's a good job we've got such competent, committed politicians, isn't it?
Liz Truss.
Thank you for that. Carry on, sorry. No, I think we missed whatever it was you said about Liz Truss, which may have been just as well. Thank you, Serena. I mean, these numbers are scary. Nick points out, and a few of you are mentioning this, and I think the previous caller alluded to it when he talked about putting it in a pension. But if you're thinking of overpaying, then money can often be better put into a pension where you get top-ups from the government. So it's always look into it. Always find out where the best place to put your money is. I think I just described that position as being really clever, which is yet more evidence of me being an idiot. Mohammed is in Elton. Mohammed, what would you like to say?
Thank you for having me, James.
A
little bit like the last caller. 2 years ago I took out a mortgage, and I took out the mortgage for about $950. This year,
a month, your monthly payment be about £950.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was about £950. This year I've had to renew. And it's gone up to about nearly £1,800, about 17 something, 1,700 and something pounds. And
so
it's like,
give or take a few quid, it's doubled overnight.
Yeah, basically.
From 1 month to the next, got to find twice as much money.
Exactly, and not only that, just like within the last year, just gradually things have just becoming so bad and so worse. It's funny. I was talking to your producer.
Yes.
I used to go into Asda. I used to spend about $160 a month. Used to put stuff into my trolley, and I never used to think about it. And yesterday we went to Asda, and my missus was like, let's buy a Kipling cupcake, and I was like, oh, that's gone up to about £2.50, £2.70, and I'm just having to calculate that extra 30p, that extra 40p into my cost, because what I used to pay £160 a month, now I'm paying about £300 for shopping, and I've got a 5-month-old now. So within the last year, I've 5 months ago, I had a little girl, and even her cost and everything's
it's all coming in at the same time, isn't it? Are you going to be all right? Are you good? I mean, can you make the savings that you need to make to keep everything moving?
It's just like I'm exactly in the same boat as your first caller. You have to just try and survive. And one last thing I'd like to say is, me growing up, a lot of my friends, in the last 5-6 years, a lot of my friends, I would say they're fairly conservative.
Yes.
They're quite comfortable. They were quite comfortable and living happily. They didn't, not within the breadline.
Sure.
But I think the last 3-4 years, me and my friendship group, we're sort of coming to that stage where, where our parents was, where, they're struggling to make ends meet. They're starting to see a big rise in things, etc. And I think we've had enough. I think we just need another government to come in, hopefully to stabilise things. And, I just hope that, Keir Starmer...
Well, I mean, you say that, and I think you mean Conservative small c. It always depresses me slightly as an old lefty that people think the Labour Party exists only to look after people who are struggling or people who need help. I mean, a fairer society with a better distribution of wealth actually helps everybody in many ways. But that's just me being a bit boring. I've got some good news for you. I'm just hearing that Rishi Sunak's about to make a speech in Kent directly addressing the concerns of people like you who have been caught up in the interest rate and cost of living. What? Oh, no, I'm sorry. He's making a speech about illegal immigration. My bad. Have a good day, man. It's 10:57. Mike's in Manchester. Mike, what would you like to say?
It's basically just on the subject of your interest rates and mortgage renewals. So mine is up for renewal in December this year, but I'm self-employed. So when I got my mortgage 2 years ago, give or take, it was, a year and a half ago, it was 2% higher then. Because I'm self-employed. Because
your income's not guaranteed. That's the logic, isn't it, behind
basically, these? Even though
it kind of is, but as much as anybody else's.
I pay into a CIS scheme, so basically I get taxed at source before I get my money.
Yeah.
So they ask for 3 years worth of books.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's basically the money's there, the income proof is there, but they wanted 3 years. But my wife, she had to provide 3 month pay slips, and then that was it. Hers was approved on the spot.
Gosh.
They had to go through all these stupid extra checks with me, and it just took so long. So in December, it's going to be interesting.
It is going to be. Have you got any idea what's on the horizon?
What do you mean?
Well, do you know what I mean? What are you thinking is likely to be the case in December? Because they've taken products off the market over the course of the weekend. The deals that you might have been able to sign up to on Friday have gone. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think anyone's betting much on them coming back by the end of the year. So do you have any idea what kind of increase you're going to be looking at?
Well, luckily for us, in September we get the 33 hours childcare, which, to be fair, we've kind of tied in quite well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Well, I mean, obviously, my car broke, so I had to buy a new car, so that's £400 a month.
It doesn't rain, does it?
We're just going to go on a variable for a few months to see what the interest rates actually do, because we don't want to tie ourselves in and then the interest rates plummet. Because when we have got a little bit of disposable income. I'm not saying we've got loads, but we have got a little bit.
Well, it's choices, isn't it? Money gives you choices.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a situation that isn't being addressed by the government.
Well, I mean, I find that remarkable. I mean, that was a very obvious mediocre joke that I made with Mohammed a minute ago about the fact that Sunak's going to be talking about bloody small boats again today.
That's what we need, isn't it? Because obviously stopping small boats pays everyone's mortgages, doesn't it?
Well, I think so. I mean, there'll be somebody, no doubt, in Idiot's Corner claiming that if you stop all these people coming over, then there'll be loads of houses. But then they'll send me another text 2 minutes later complaining about the fact that they're all sharing rooms in hotels. So I don't know. But I wish you well. And I wish, like you, that the government focused on stuff that really mattered and made a difference to people rather than the stuff that they've been told to focus on by the Daily Mail. I think we'll knock it on the head there, although lots of people keen to continue the conversation. I might stay in financial territory on this one. Do you know that the phrase universal basic income is trending on Twitter this morning? Now, trending on Twitter doesn't mean much. You can do it with about 1,000 tweets these days, but this one's got over 10,000. It means a conversation is being had that we first had on this programme some years ago. And I'm delighted to tell you, I told you that this phenomenon was going to grow in stature as the years passed, to the point where I think it's about to become almost inevitable, especially when you add UBI to AI. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. It was a lad in Sheffield, I wish I could remember the name of his organisation, that first got in touch with me about universal basic income, and I thought it sounded like a load of Marxist claptrap. I'm not going to lie to you, and I'm quite fond of some Marxist claptrap, but it just seemed to me to be unworkable, and then I started thinking about it. And I started learning a little bit more about it. Do you remember Tomorrow's World? What age do you have to be to remember Tomorrow's World? Do you remember Tomorrow's World? Oh, it was this wonderful programme telling us what the future was going to be like. Some of it's turned up, quite a lot of it hasn't. The little tablets you could have instead of eating a meal. Were they on Tomorrow's World, or did I imagine those? Maybe they were in 2000 AD. But it was like a sort of futuristic magazine show predicting things that were going to happen in the future. And one of the things that I think we were all fairly confident was going to happen was the fact that we were all going to work less as a consequence of the robots taking over. You can allow yourself a little wry chuckle at this point if you're staring at the week ahead and wondering how the hell you're going to get everything done. But if you think about it, you would have probably expected, if you were watching television in the 1970s, you would probably have expected to be taking it a little bit easier by now if these robots that they were telling us about were going to be as life-changing as they told us they were going to be. I remember the car production lines at Longbridge. It was on ATV News or Central News. I remember it looked amazing. It looked like something out of a science fiction film with the robot arms and putting all the cars together. And yet here we are. Probably more likely now to have two people working in the average household than one, which was the case in the 1960s and the 1970s. And our hours don't seem to have got much shorter or much easier. And yet there's still a very real sense that the world is going to change in that way. Two stories in the news today, which I think we should examine in parallel, in conjunction with each other. One is about the generation that we would loosely describe as Generation AI, as in young adults aged 18 to 24. Out of all of us, you are the most concerned that artificial intelligence will do your job for you or damage your employment prospects. Nearly half of people expect that advanced AI may one day start to act against human interests. There's always a little bit of a moral panic with new technology. Do you know who the Luddites were? Well, I had to read up on this the other day. The Luddites would go and break things. They would go into mills, for example, and smash up machinery because the machinery was replacing humans. So you think of it that way round. If you replace humans, they no longer get a wage. This was in an era when there was no welfare state, before the Labour Party managed, against all the odds, to make some meaningful change to the whole of our society, which the Tories and their friends in the media have been trying to undo ever since. There was no national health service, no welfare state. If you didn't earn a crust, you would rely on the parish, I suppose, if you were lucky, or end up in a workhouse or starve to death. So you can understand why what would that be? That would be the Industrial Revolution and the Agricultural Revolution, when machinery was brought in to do jobs that had previously been done by humans. In the case of the cotton mills, it would be children quite often and women. Then people were worried because you haven't got the luxury of thinking we shouldn't really be sending kids up chimneys if you need the kid up the chimney in order to eat tonight. Do you see what I mean? So it's nothing new about any of this. There's always an air of moral panic, but also a sort of fiscal panic. In that, what do you mean? Can I get a computer to do my job? How am I going to pay my mortgage? I've got to pay it till I'm 73. This is ridiculous. So the world moulds according to technology. I mean, again, to be a little bit glib, when the motor car first went into mass production, appalling outrage and worry coming from blacksmiths, people in the horse business, who saw pretty accurately that their days were numbered, but they were numbered and they ended and we move on. So it's not quite as existential necessarily as it's sometimes portrayed. But the idea, also, I think there's two things in my mind. One is AI plus UBI equals inevitable now. But the other is the redistribution of wealth. The distribution of wealth now is so completely skewed, more so in this country than in almost any other. The accruement, is that the right word? The accruement? The accruement of wealth at the top of the pyramid is off the blooming charts. It really is. People ringing up to tell me that they're going to be paying off their mortgage until they're 73, and then opening up the Daily Telegraph to read articles about why we're really going in far too hard on billionaires and millionaires or whatever it may be. This idea that we can carry on as we are. Let's think about it like this. You're paying your money for products and services. And if you haven't got any money, think about Michael, the first call in the last hour, trying to get by now on £400 a month with a family of 3. You're not oiling the wheels of the economy. Everything needs to be turning in order to keep everything moving. And if we've reached a point where a combination of unfair distribution of wealth, and remember, all of the people accruing all of the wealth are largely in control of the flow of information, all of that is in place. But the rest of us who are cogs, smaller cogs, in the same machine, if we stop turning, everything grinds to a halt. This is possibly a little simplistic, but this is where I am at the moment. So, first of all, the distribution of wealth, which has always been relevant to the conversation about universal basic income. And second of all, the technological revolution, which we are almost certainly in already. Now, 2 places in England. I think this is staggering, actually. Genuinely staggering. I know I said it was a slow news day, but that was only because the BBC crossed live to ITV, where a television presenter was making a statement about another television presenter after one of them returned to work and the other one didn't. Strange times we inhabit. This to me may be one of the biggest stories of our time together. Potentially, in terms of the size of the tree that is likely to grow from this relatively tiny seed. A universal basic income that will run for 2 years and will involve 30 people. For 2 years, every month, no questions asked, will be given £1,600 a month. No questions. Think of the difference that would make to Michael, our first caller. I mean, it's stunning. It's a really interesting sum of money as well. Because people who earn 10 times that every month will be receiving their orders now to start raging and raving about how it's completely unsustainable and how is anyone ever going to be able to pay for it. But I think that a universal basic income is probably inevitable. And the crucial word here is universal. So everybody gets it. Not in this scheme, obviously, this is just 30 people, but what they're looking to measure is the difference that it has upon people's lives. £1,600 every month. East Finchley, goodness knows how they've selected these 2 places. Jarrow, which is one of those places in the northeast that it's very hard to name without doing the relevant accent, I find. Jarrow and East Finchley in North London. Now, I imagine £1,600 goes a lot further in Jarrow than it does in East Finchley. Not least because of property costs and similar. But what they're looking at is, it's more than what if any original universal basic income would be, because that would just cover basic needs. So what they're doing is giving an unconditional lump sum to people every month and seeing what they do, seeing the impact it has on their mental and physical health. Some people might put it up their nose, some people might just live on donuts. Some people might make really powerful, profound and meaningful changes to their life. Some people might just stick it all in the bank and move along. So it's a really important bit of research on the impact that it will have. And they're also then going to look at the question of whether they would choose to work or not. So the first way to think about this is to think about what you would do. And this is a really interesting question, because there'll be people listening to this programme for whom £1,600 a month would not make that much difference to their life at all. There'll be people listening to this programme for whom £1,600 a month would make not the tiniest bit of difference at all. And then there'll be people for whom £1,600 a month would quadruple or quintuple their disposable income and open up all manner of avenues that they wouldn't otherwise be able to explore. Nick had the director of the autonomy think tank that's backing this plan on earlier, and he said some really interesting things, at least two of which lend themselves to our conversation this morning. He says our society is going to require some form of basic income in the coming years. He references tech disruption, industrial transition, climate change. Getting the evidence in place and getting public engagement up is therefore crucial. Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, is behind it. He calls it an idea whose time has come. as he spoke on the cost of living crisis. A universal basic income will put a solid foundation beneath everybody so that they can have a life with security and stop worrying about everything. Wales has already rolled this out for young people leaving care. They're going to report on that after the trial finishes. 2 years leaving care. Some of the most vulnerable people in society receiving £1,600 a month, every month, for 2 years. You've got 170 MPs and peers in 2020 urging the government to have a look at it. I mean, it's so boring, isn't it, the way so much of our media is defined by knee-jerk reactions to anything that looks like progress. But I do, on this occasion, understand how there might be initial reservations, how there might be a sort of, oh, my goodness, how... But just stop for a minute. Stop for a minute. Think of... All right, I'm going to go a bit woo now. You ready? Think of all the money in the country right now. Think of all the money in the economy. It doesn't even have to be money that's in people's pockets or bank accounts. Think of all the money in the economy right now. Okay? And now think of all the people. Okay? So take all of the money and all of the people. Open the doors, and here is the steeple. That's not quite how it works, is it? You take all of the money and all of the people, and you just give £1,600 to everybody in the country, the richest person in the country and the poorest person in the country, and everybody in between. And then the money that's left over is redistributed according to where it was before. So the richest person in the country is still the richest person in the country. They've got £1,600 a month extra that they're not going to need or notice. And the poorest person in the country is still the poorest person in the country, but they're considerably less poorer than they were before. Now, I know that might sound naive, but that's why I'm looking at the numbers first rather than the philosophy. Because if something like this doesn't happen, what happens to us all? What happens to our society? I mean, the question of whether money is finite or infinite is a weird one. I mean, you know, quantitative easing gives something of the lie to almost all of the pronouncements Margaret Thatcher made on this subject about it. But if you just think of it like that, so at some point in the middle, well, not the middle in terms of 50-50, at some point near the top of the wealth ladder, people are going to actually be worse off because the people who don't notice 1,600 quid are obviously going to be the ones from whom the money is taken in taxation, in some form of taxation. But they're still going to be richer than everybody else. They're still going to have more spending power than everybody else. If they really do subscribe to the laws of supply and demand in the way that they claim to, they're still going to be the ones, you know, buying the bouncy castles. I want to have a really broad conversation about this, but I really want to have a clever one. I really don't want to just file it under, it's a bit progressive. Who's going to pay for it? Here's the starter for 10, all right? I think this is absolutely inevitable. Whether you like it or not, I cannot see some form of universal basic income not being in place by the time I pop my clogs. Presuming I've got a good few decades on the clock yet. I just don't see how all of the tides of our time are not pushing us towards this sort of position. I don't know why I started with Tomorrow's World, but that is the counter-argument almost, is that I've been told almost all my life that I would be living in a world where people worked a lot less and technology did a lot more. That hasn't happened. I don't fully understand why. Answers to that question are welcome. But universal basic income. Number one, why do you want it to happen? 0345 6060973. Or, of course, why don't you want it to happen? Number two, is it just inevitable? Is it one of those things that sounds absolutely apocalyptic? But the more you think about it, the more obviously inevitable it becomes. Think about also, as Julie points out, think about child benefit and the old age pension. All right? So it's not that remarkable. Think of it like an old age pension for everybody. 0345 6060973. And listen, if it's got you clutching your pearls, if it's spooked you, I want to hear from you as well. Because maybe you've got the powerful arguments to explain why it's neither inevitable nor desirable. But if you call it universal basic income, everybody gets it. It is simply an extension of the old age pension to everybody. And given that the pension age keeps getting higher and higher and higher, that adds to the ineluctable logic of the idea. Everybody gets a few £100 a month, enough to ensure that nobody is going to be completely on their uppers. What's the problem with that? 0345 6060 973. And just to insulate myself against, not ignorance, that wouldn't be fair, but the £1,600 figure is not what it would be. That's for the pilot. It's absolutely crystal clear. Anybody not explaining that to you is deliberately misleading you. The £1,600 figure has been settled upon in order to accelerate the research and make an even bigger change than any form of universal basic income actually would. The calculation would be how much do people need, or what's feasible and viable, but how much would people need in order to rise them above the rockiest bottom, if you like, of the socio-economic ladder. It's got to be good, no? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 11:21, sorry. 23 minutes after 11. What would you do you think? I mean, say £700 or £800 a month that you got with before you went to work. What would you do? I very much doubt you'd give up work. So the figure would have to be set somewhere that didn't discourage work. But £1,600 a month with, after tax, if you like, actually in your hand, in your pocket. Absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to see what difference it makes to people. Scott points out if AI, it literally is going to take all our jobs. If it doesn't kill us all, then UBI becomes inevitable. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, and so do I. Caroline's in Victoria. Caroline, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I love your programme. Just wanted to say I think I agree with you entirely. I think UBI is going to come, and I think that's going to be a great thing in many ways. The only thing I worry about is people losing their motivation. Is if you know you're going to get your 700 or 1,600 or whatever it is, does that stop you wanting to go out and do things?
Would it stop you?
Because, no, it wouldn't. It would not stop me. I love what I do, but I would hate to think, particularly of young people, feeling like, you know that sort of buzz you get from working and the enjoyment, and you feel useful and you feel like you've done something great. Yeah. Sometimes, I hope. I would hate for that feeling to go, and to for a feeling of God.
What makes you think that it would? Because
I don't know.
The way I see it. Well, first of all, do you think that old age pensioners have lost any sort of thrill of engagement with the wider world when they get their pension? I mean, and also just to refer to Idiot's Corner. David writes, this is brilliant, schoolboy debating society stuff. Shall we just take it all from the billionaires? No, mate, we'll take it all from the same people that the old age pension is funded by, i.e. all of us.
Yeah.
Some will end up on net gain, some will end up in net loss. But it seems to me that when you remind anyone of the old age pension, the principle behind this becomes almost unassailable. So you just set it at a figure. You'd have to be a little bit careful, wouldn't you? Some people will live on buttons, Caroline, because they're just built that way, and I'm not one for demonising them in particular. I'd rather that they had a degree of comfort, but obviously considerably less comfort than people who do work. And I don't like the idea that's often out there whenever we have conversations around this subject, that the harder you work, the more money you make. I don't think anyone really thinks that's true. Some of the hardest working people in the country will be some of the most poorly paid. So you just have to put it at a level where it handles the very, very basics. And if you're happy with the very, very basics, then that's the price we pay for looking after everybody else who would just use it as a springboard into aspiration and achievement. No?
Yep, no, I completely agree with you. And I think, just to answer your initial question on the OAPs, I do think that your world can shut down a little bit when you stop going into a workplace, or you stop Zooming, whatever it is. You have to make a real effort to get out there and engage, and that will still happen. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I really don't.
No, I don't either. We shall see. Someone will. 27 minutes after 11 is the time. I mean, the real interesting question is the one that's pure opinion. I don't know that there'll be much evidence we can bring to bear to answer on it, but goodness me, the inevitability of it is something that is growing in my mind every time we talk about it. Ben's in Bexley. Ben, what do you think?
Oh, hi there, mate. Yeah, I'm no economist by any means, but I can't help thinking about the rise of the two household income decades ago, and how prices just seem to eventually rise to match that. So getting a mortgage or anything is based around a two-person income, and so 1,600 quid or whatever it turns out to be in the pockets of people, is that not just going to eventually be swallowed up by general costs?
I wouldn't have thought so, because then it would rise, wouldn't it? If it is calibrated to basic needs, then if the cost of basic needs rises, then the universal basic income rises as well.
But basic needs have been rising, and I mean, just look at fuel. How we see that the cost of fuel has increased unnecessarily. It's not been
without universal basic income.
Yes, so I mean,
so it doesn't really become an argument against it when it's already happening without it.
Well, no, definitely. I'm actually quite for it, but I just think would there have to be some checks and balances in place to make sure that it's not just then swallowed up again by
corporate greed.
Control thing.
Corporate greed. Yeah, I guess they would. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You're seeing it from that end, that the corporate greed would just swallow up the excess cash in the pockets of the average punter. And then at the other end, you've got, well, it might just mean that people stay at home all day and don't do anything. The reason I think it's inevitable is actually because of that very simple analogy about wheels turning. And the relationship between work and income changing, and the relationship between work and humans changing, and AI changing everything. And the idea that you're going to have to find some sort of way of redistributing wealth that is not part of the capitalist model, because you need wealth to be redistributed. We all need customers. I always remember that racist in Bishop Stortford who rang me up years and years and years ago when I just started breaking Brexit eggs, and he claimed that his local shop was full of immigrants and he couldn't get to the till. And I just thought, well, I bet the shopkeeper's happy. You know, I mean, what is this? A shop that wants fewer customers? So you need people to have a few quid in their pocket. And if the way that society has gone has reduced the amount in most people's pockets, and remember, in the first hour, we were speaking to homeowners, hard-working mortgage holders, and they've got next to no disposable income anymore. So it would help everybody. And if you think it sounds unworkable or Marxist, then I look forward to your petition calling for the abolition of the old age pension. It's 11:30, and Lottie Morley's here with your headlines. I mean, whatever UBI was, it's unlikely to push many of us into the helicopter class, is it? We're not going to be travelling anywhere by helicopter, even if we did get an extra few hundred quid a month as a consequence of universal basic income. Here's a question for you. Why do you think it's about an hour to Dover on the train, right? You go from St Pancras, right? St Pancras to Dover? It's the Margate train out of St Pancras International. I'm sure it is. It's about an hour, give or take. Why has Rishi Sunak gone by helicopter? Now, there are 2 or 3 answers to that question. One is, well, he doesn't want to bump into any peasants, which I think is plausible, but probably not entirely fair. The second is he's not quite sure what trains are yet. He's working on it. A bit like, you know, the debit cards. What's it called? Not click and collect. What's it called when you touch and go? No, what's it called? Contactless. A bit like contactless cards. That he, needed when he had to borrow that car to pretend he was filling it up with petrol. He's not quite got the hang of trains yet. It's just that could be part of it. I've got a third reason why he would fly to Dover by helicopter, even though it only takes an hour on the train. And you can get work done on the train as well. You can't get much work done in a helicopter. They're very noisy, apparently. I think it's because the railways are in such a state on non-strike days that he would end up being almost proof of Mick Lynch and Mick Whelan's points, wouldn't he? Potentially. Just a thought. I don't know what that line in particular is like, the St Pancras to Margate line where you'd hop off at Dover Priory. But anyway, he's gone by helicopter. Nice work if you can get it. Daniel's in Finchley. Daniel, what would you like to say about UBI? Or helicopters, but it was UBI that was on the agenda first.
No, I think I'll talk about UBI. Well, all I want to say is that I am a big fan of UBI. I've been sort of advocating, campaigning for a number of years. And I think that UBI is a good thing because it gives everyone essentially what you're describing. It's like a floor of economic security,
yes,
so that everyone can build their lives on that. It's not about giving everyone sort of 5-bedroom houses with swimming pools. It's about covering the basics so that you know that you don't have to worry about that, and then you can build your life on that. And I think in in the last sort of couple of years when we've had pandemics and all sorts of kind of economic shocks, that has become more and more important. And so that's why I'm a big supporter.
I mean, it's a humane policy. Also, as Emma points out, UBI money will move, won't it? It will almost all move. It won't be accruing in accounts. Some people will be in a comfortable enough position to, stick it all in an ISA or stick it all in the bank or overpay on their mortgage. But the massive majority of people in receipt of it will be out spending it on, if you like, day-to-day things. It will be circulating through the economy, and that is good for everybody. Who's against it in your experience?
Well, I think people tend to. Some of the objections are often around two things. One is, what will people do with it? Right? Will they spend it all on fags and watching television and drinking beer? Generally, what I tend to say about that is, I tend to think that I'm not that special, and I'm like other people, and I don't think I would do that. And you posed that question to one of your colleagues. What would that stop you working? And people always say, "Oh no, not me, but other people."
But those other people over there with the flat screen televisions, because that's the weirdest thing about right wing rhetoric about feckless, work shy, lazy people. Is it if their choices are so attractive, why don't you do it yourself?
Yeah, most people don't, because
I don't want to live
like
that.
You, right? So they will do whatever, whatever is sensible, right? And they will spend it on whatever. I would have thought so.
Yes, exactly. And we are mostly, and if you're not aspirational, then you probably need some help in other areas of your life in order to be leading a slightly better existence. But it is such a powerful weapon used by right-wing idiots to it used to be flat-screen TVs. Do you remember that? Everyone had a flat-screen TV. About 10 years after, it became impossible to buy a telly that wasn't flat-screen. They were still banging on about how everybody who received any benefit at all from the welfare state was spending it all on flat-screen television. So you'll get the same rhetoric here. I imagine, in fact, I can state with a degree of certainty that I will be in the cohort of people that, in net terms, is worse off according to this. But I won't see it like that, because the tax will go and the universal basic income will come, and you cut your cloth according to what your taxation is. So I will be worse off technically, but I won't feel worse off unless some monster comes up and starts whispering in my ear that, why are you looking after anybody? Why are you helping people who've got less than you? Why are you trying to make the world a nicer place? Why are you trying to make society fairer? Why are you trying to eradicate poverty? God, no one ever helps you, do they? 11:38 is the time. Neil's in Alton. Neil, what do you reckon? Do you think it's inevitable? Do you think it's inevitable?
Morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Yeah, I think it probably is.
I do too. That's a big surprise.
I like it as a concept.
Yes.
And I think, it's an absolutely sensible thing to do. Think about it. If you make people financially secure in terms of covering the bait, like the previous caller said, I agree with much of what they said, giving them that financial safety blanket, you can pay the bills, and it gives you choices, and it gives you, and it actually doesn't de-incentivize people. I think, contrary to what one of the previous callers said, I think it absolutely gives you more incentive. It gives you a platform to build on. So if you got aspirations about building a career in a particular area, and you need to retrain, for example, it opens up options for you, and to perhaps be able to do that. My own dad actually he had a disability. He was wounded in the war, and he was an amputee, intelligent man, and he had to make some really difficult choices about, because he couldn't get menial jobs, as an amputee, about retraining, really tough financial choices, which meant we all suffered, a lot really when we were kids financially, but it paid dividends in the long term. But having something like a basic universal income would have freed him up to make those choices.
Do you know, it is funny, isn't it? I was reading about the time Paul Dacre accused Ed Miliband's dad of hating Britain, even though he'd done 3 or 4 years in the Royal Navy, and I think he was there on D-Day. And just because he was a fan of Marxist politics and philosophy, and that's what terrifies people, isn't it? So it's not necessarily communism. It is anything that just a little tweak of redistribution, because you can walk past a doorway and see someone sleeping in it and think to yourself, this is the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. How the hell can that actually be happening?
Exactly. Yeah.
But this is about people like our callers in the first hour who are living on, really close to the edge, in order to play by the rules.
Economics of it, James, that money is all going to, as you were just saying, it's all going to slosh around the economy. So even if people are spending on flat screen TVs or booze and fags, that is all money that's going back into the economy that's driving jobs in the booze and fag shop.
I'd never thought of that. So you're vampiric.
But it is.
That's a beautiful point. So you're horrible, vampiric, secretly funded think tanks who are constantly defending the interests of the super rich actually hate there's a contradiction at the heart of that, because they're also usually shilling for sort of tobacco and alcohol and trying to get rid of
Exactly, they're the ones flogging all the booze and fags and TVs.
Yeah,
trying to shoot themselves in the foot there. Right?
I hadn't thought of it.
But seriously, it all sloshes around in the economy, and that all creates revenue for the government, VAT. They're getting most of that money will be going back into the government coffers anyway, one way or the other, in VAT or other forms of revenue. So I think it's a great pump primer, and I think it will give people opportunities. It will raise
until the numbers come out. And although this hasn't worked with inheritance tax, has it? Because that affects a tiny number of us, but they've still managed to get the narrative of if the numbers come out and everyone can see whether they'd be better or worse off under it. That's the political challenge.
Yeah, I'm one of those, fortunately, kind of comfortable boomers.
Yeah.
That we obviously lampoon, but I'd be happy to pay a little bit more tax, like you, James. You
wouldn't notice
to cover
it, would
things
you?
like. Wouldn't notice it, no, and I'd be happy to do that to make other people, to raise other people's standard of living and give them the opportunities that we were happy, fortunate to have.
Yeah, like you say, raising the bottom. I like it, and not to the point where everyone stays at home all day every day, but 4-day weeks could become more commonplace. Job sharing, or just different ways. I always think, I don't know, maybe I'm missing some epic point. Maybe I skipped the lecture at the LSE. That's actually quite possible. But the idea that the relationship between the sum total of money moving around an economy and each individual stake in that economy is just skewed at the moment. It's wrong, and it's not calling for a sort of totalitarian overthrow in order to just rejig it slightly, to recalibrate it. I love that word. You've probably noticed. Jorrit is in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. Jorrit, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm Speaker. Hi, how are you? Good morning.
Very well. What's on your mind?
Well, last time I called you, you asked me to speak on behalf of the entire international community, so I'm glad you've lowered the pressure on me this time
just the UBI today.
Just the UBI, sir. Well, there are experiments, and the science is clear on this. In Alaska, in Canada, and in fact, I was the co-author of a legislative proposal in the city of Amsterdam that UBI works. Yes, I was. We had to do this off our Amsterdam budget, on top of what you guys used to call the dole, and what your producer has kindly informed me I should now refer to as unemployment benefits.
Yes.
Or I never understood what the difference is between that and universal credit, but that's neither here nor there. So,
well, I'll tell you. I will tell you. Universal credit goes to people in work as well as people who are not in work, because it's a beautiful illustration of what we're talking about, because the idea that your income would provide enough to lead a life insulated from the worst effects of the economy. Yeah, exactly, that has gone. So you now need to have support from the state when you're on low wages. It seems a natural progression from dole to universal credit to universal basic income when you think of it in those terms.
Now, James, I'm not good at being brief, and I know you're a prime-time host, but if I can try very quickly to frame this larger and then very quickly zoom in on what we saw in Amsterdam. So firstly, John Maynard Keynes, a queer icon, I should say, and the economist that is mainly behind things like anti-cyclical investment when economies are doing badly, and the 38-hour work week, has always predicted or said that what we should do is have the benefits of automation rebound to the workforce. History shows that it never has. The benefits of automation, industrialization, whether it's AI or whatever that thing is they have in factories where, the automatic line that moves. I'm sorry, my English is failing me here.
You're doing very well, but I am short of time, so give me the headlines.
So very quickly, I fear your optimism is misplaced. I do not believe. I think the entire neoliberal construct that underlies our society, mine and yours,
They will resist it. They will resist it too furiously because the whole.
They require us to be dependent. Yes.
Oh, of course. So the whole system is structured in a way that keeps the flow heading ever upwards to ever more inequality and unfairness, and any attempt to halt that would be resisted. I don't know, though. What about the argument, very briefly, what about the fact that money moves, the fact that the smallest cogs in the machine have to keep turning in order for the biggest cogs to turn at all?
Well, sir, we know this is true. When you give tax cuts to rich people, they put them in their stock portfolio or on their bank savings account. When you give money to poor people, they put it in the economy because they need a new fridge, and they haven't for a decade. So this is all true. But if you look at the numbers, you and I both live in countries where we spend more on fraud prevention for people on employment benefits than we actually, if we were to just cut that entire department, we would save so much money, but we don't, because it's part of the neoliberal argument to go, oh, well, we wouldn't want these people to...
No, you're right. They're punching down, smile up, punch down, get rid... Yeah, and that's oddly, it's a different strand, isn't it, of the flat screen television narratives and the idea that I don't know anybody like that. I certainly wouldn't want to be like that myself, but you can't have more fairness in society because of all the people that would take advantage. If taking advantage is such an attractive option, then do it yourself. And yet, oh no, I don't want to live like that. It's an odd one, that. I haven't quite cracked it, but you're closer than me, clearly. Rishi Sunak's just got out of his helicopter in Dover to deliver a speech about how his plans to stop the boats are working really, really well. And an ITV journalist has just pointed out it's been exceptionally windy in the Channel for several days now, meaning that there have been hardly any small boat crossings. Is that why you've chosen to come here today? I can tell you, I don't think I'm betraying any confidences, that Rishi Sunak's speech was announced yesterday. 10 to 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A universal basic income. The Dutch perspective, quite pessimistic, but he's probably got a point. It's a bit like that old line about voting, isn't it? Which I think is unduly cynical, but it's pithy, and I like pithy. So if voting made any difference, they wouldn't let us do it. But the idea that, well, actually, try this from Trevor in Camden, who's got his revolutionary socks on today. He says, the introduction of universal basic income will not necessarily be solely to help the poorest, James, but also to preserve the richest. Well, pray tell me more, Trevor. The welfare state and state pensions were created through necessity once society's social and economic disparities had become too evident. I think that's probably true. The idea that you can't sustain this status quo because its fundamental inequality, disparity, unfairness is being rubbed in our faces on a daily basis. Without adjustment, it's hard to imagine that a future impoverished population would not revolt against the gated estates protected by AI robocops. To which Trevor adds, happy days. So it's all gone a bit Hunger Games there, hasn't it? That is, I use that analogy a lot. I don't know why, probably because I enjoyed the book so much. I don't think I've ever watched the films. But the idea that you have societies where 90% of the population is essentially dedicated to the luxury, privilege and pleasure of the rest of it. Is he there? No. It is 9 minutes to 12. I may have a guest for you shortly, but before that, a caller. Back on universal basic income. I kind of need someone to tell me why it's a really bad idea, but I know what you're going to say. And it will be, I'll be worse off, so why should I be in favour of it? Is there a more, what's a polite way of putting it? Because I'll be worse off. Is there a more persuasive or less selfish argument than, well, I think I'll probably be worse off, therefore I think it's a terrible idea? I don't know. Let's find out. Mike's in Stoke-on-Trent. Mike, what would you like to say?
I don't think it's a terrible idea at all. I think it's inevitable with AI. And the advancements that's going to make in the very near future, and bring it on. The sooner the better. Let Britain lead the world in it. I
doubt we will. I suspect someone probably, off the top of my head, somewhere like Finland's probably already having a proper look at it as we speak. I don't know, but it would be nice to be in the front row.
Yeah, possibly, but there's nothing stopping us overtaking. There's nothing stopping us going there.
That's very true.
My son as a child, he's a sole parent of a 5-year-old, and he's working every day. We do as much as we can to look after him, but he's had to reduce his hours so that we can take him to school and pick him up from school. He's barely surviving, and that's not what life is about.
No,
it isn't what life is about. Let's bring in a universal basic income so that people like my son can start to thrive, so we can possibly even start his own business. I agree with. I sort of agree with a lot of what your last caller was saying about technology hasn't actually improve things for us. And I've seen that when I was younger. It was going to be the paperless society in just a few years, and it's taken years and years and years, to finally get that technology to a point, for example, where we're a paperless society almost. I don't think it'll be like that with AI. I think AI will advance so fast, and I think we need to be prepared for it.
We've got to be ready for it, and we've got to recalibrate our economic model in order to really preserve, I don't want to say civilization, because that sounds like I'm talking about humanity, but I'm not. You want to preserve civilization, or you want to go dystopian. There's not many other options. I really like this conversation. I think we'll return to it. But big matters afoot this morning in... Prince Harry expected to turn up in court. He's not going to turn up in court today. It's a legal action he's taking against Mirror Group newspapers that is significant and potentially hugely important for a whole heap of reasons. Dr. Evan Harris is a legal consultant to the claimant group in all of the ongoing hacking litigation, which is being fought on at least 3 fronts at the moment. But we will focus, if we may, Evan, on today's case, which is Mirror Group newspapers. And Prince Harry, although the most prominent, is far from alone.
No, that's right. Good morning. There are 4 sample claimants whose cases are being heard in this trial. So Prince Harry, 33 of his 147 claimed articles, the ones he claims were illegally obtained, is being heard. And then all of the articles for Nikki Sanderson, who's a Coronation Street actress, Michael Turner, Michael Lavelle, who's another actor, Coronation Street and other things, and Fiona Whiteman, the ex-wife of the comedian Paul Whitehouse. So those are 4 sample cases of around 90 that are in this wave, because this litigation comes in waves, because the defendant can't cope with too many to get ready for trial. And there have been nearly 1,000 cases altogether since these first started in the end of 2012. And there may be several hundred or even several thousand more to come, depending on the outcome of this trial. The idea is that this trial, the judgment here, will be helpful to all other claimants. Claimants who
include Ian Wright, Cheryl Cole, the estate of George Michael. We should stress the Mirror Group has steadfastly denied all the allegations, adding that the claimants have waited too long to sue them. So Mirror Group adamant that there is no case to answer, but also that they shouldn't have to answer the case because it's taken so long to come to court.
In some cases, that's right. They've said that it's too late for some claimants in some of the cases for the whole case, and that will be determined in this trial. And they've made some admissions because there was an earlier trial, but it's true to say that most of the articles that are being alleged are not being admitted by them. And those, Ian Wright was on the substitutes bench for this trial if one of these 4 claims settled. Okay. But they didn't settle, so he didn't make it into this trial.
It sounds like a big operation on your side of the courtroom. It sounds like there's a lot of work and a lot of cooperation going on.
Yes, because this is managed litigation, so people aren't on their own with their own lawyers, each doing their own thing. There are about 10 claimant law firms who are working together, and the judge manages all the cases together. So things are to reduce the costs and to reduce the drain on court time, because if you had 100 cases go through the courts, nothing else would be heard. So this is one large case. It's not a group litigation, but it's a series of individual cases that are managed together. And I can tell you that the defendant, to be fair to them, is also working very hard and is employing a large law firm, a number of counsel. And it's a fascinating, for me as a non-lawyer, who's now sort of a mini expert in a small area of law, it's been a very interesting experience to see happen over the last few years.
I dare say. I'm going to have a go, Evan Harris, at explaining what a Part 36 is. and and then you will tell me whether I've got it right or wrong, because it's very pertinent to what we're discussing here.
It is indeed.
So one of the reasons why a very large number of celebrities have had cases similar to this settled with large financial settlements, but no admission of wrongdoing on the part of the newspaper company handing over a large sum of cash to people who've taken legal action, is because of something called Part 36. Now that means if I were suing you and you made me an offer without any admission of wrongdoing, and I didn't accept that offer because I wanted my day in court and I wanted the admission of wrongdoing, possibly even more than I wanted the money, if we then went to court, and I'm taking the risk, of course, of losing, but if I then won and the court decided to award less money in damages than you had offered me a year or 2 years ago, then I could be liable for your costs, which would run well into the millions of pounds. So I would end up winning a case against you, but having to sell my house and probably go bankrupt in order to hand over all of my money to the newspaper company that had, brackets, allegedly closed brackets, stolen my information in the first place.
That's one of the best explanations I've heard. It can happen with or without admissions. So the Mirror Group does tend to make admissions because there was a trial where it was found that it was widespread at all three titles during the period 1999 to 2006. So they generally make some admissions. If they make an offer more than you're advised and your insurers are advised that you can beat, then not only do you have to pay the other side's costs, but the insurers pull out and you're faced with the problem of paying your own side's costs. And because those costs, as you said, are much more than the damages the court awards or even that you've been offered, you'll be out of pocket. And you have to be fabulously rich in order to have your day in court. It's one of the quirks. There's a reason for it, obviously. You can't have people who want their day in court and refuse to settle even when they're getting everything they want. But it does mean that it's taken people who are prepared, as Prince Harry has said he is, to even take a financial loss. I don't think that necessarily applies in this case because you may not have had an offer because Mirror Group were happy to go to trial.
Right.
But where they're not happy to go to trial, it's really hard without taking a big financial risk. And that's why people who settle have a statement in open court and you hear them speak on the steps of court like Sienna Miller did and I did when I brought my hacking claim and try and explain that's why they've settled. They've not taken the money and run. They've taken the money despite a keen interest in getting the court to decide what happened.
So of the three fronts currently being fought, which are Mirror Group newspapers, News Corp and the Daily Mail and General Trust, and I think Harry's involved in all three, isn't he?
He is.
Which is most likely to get to court, or is that an inappropriate question?
No, I think one can see from the public domain, I won't give you any trade secrets, that we are in court for Mirror Group because Mirror Group said they were going to stop settling all these cases and get this trial determined, these matters determined once and for all, because they hope they'll get a judgment that says everyone else is too late.
Right.
And they can draw a line under it. Obviously, we don't think that's right, and the judge will decide that. But that's why they've taken what will be, I think, a hit to their reputation and the reputation of a number of high-profile individuals. There is a trial due on the Sun and News of the World litigation in January. That's been timetabled in. And obviously Prince Harry has said he's not going to settle.
Right.
That's what he said in public to Tom Bradby in an interview for ITV. So people are assuming that's going to happen. I'm not going to give any inside secrets. That's known that that's his position. With the Mail, we're waiting to see what the judgment is following that hearing you'll have seen, where Prince Harry and Elton John and Baroness Lawrence were facing an attempt by the Mail to say you're too late at the very start. And we haven't had that judgment yet. If that judgment goes in our favour, then we will be still months and years away from a trial, but that litigation will then be able to progress.
You've been doing this for a few years now, Evan, as you say, driven originally by your own experiences at the hands of newspapers. For those of us who bemoan the abandonment of Levison 2 by, I think it was Theresa May's government, wasn't it, in the end?
Yes, announced by Matt Hancock, remember him?
Yeah, I do vaguely, unfortunately. For those of us who bemoan the ending of Levison 2 and the failure of David Cameron to implement many or indeed any of the recommendations made by Levison 1, where do you sort of put this on the scale of significance, the moment that we're in now on these three fronts?
Well, the reason I got into it was I was working for Hacked Off. I didn't realise I was a hacking victim until I started working for the lawyers.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Saw my own name and number crop
Good
up
Lord, really?
in what was disclosed, yes. But I was appalled that a government would cancel a public inquiry for the first time ever against the wishes of the judge, the chairman, Lord Levison, who said it needed to happen. And this is the first time the press have ever called for less openness, less sunlight, because it was dealing with their own business. And therefore, for me and many others, and for the victims, even more importantly, this is unfinished business. Are the courts a substitute for that? Well, not a very satisfactory one, but they are a decent one, because you will get things out in the open, documents out in the open, which you do in a public inquiry, and you will get findings of fact. It's not as good as a public inquiry, and my hope is that if we win our case, which alleges huge amounts of what's called perverting the course of justice and perjury at the Levison inquiry. Those are public allegations denied by the other side.
Yes.
If that happens and the judge finds that there was, then I think the pressure for the Levison inquiry to be completed will be huge on, let's face it, the next government, because I have no hope in this government weaning itself off the teat of the Daily Mail and the Sun.
Dr. Evan Harris, many thanks indeed. Working on the legal teams, with the legal teams on these hacking cases, and also, of course, a stalwart of the Hacked Off group. I'll give you a full account of what Mirror Group newspapers are saying in this case. They deny allegations of voicemail interception in the cases being examined here and claim some of the cases being brought are beyond a legal limit. They've defended some of their reporting by alleging a public interest or claiming that published information was limited and banal. In the case of Prince Harry, there are 33 articles central to his claim. But the Mirror Group's lawyer, Andrew Green KC, says in his written submissions that the publisher denies 28 of them involved phone hacking or other unlawful imitation gathering. He says, and in some ways this is interesting in its own right, that stories instead came from a variety of other sources, including other members of the royal family. So the Mirror Group's defence on allegations of phone hacking is that we didn't hack his phone. We got the stories from his relatives. Green added that it was not admitted that the 5 remaining articles contained unlawful information gathering. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. It is 9 minutes after 12. A couple of things on the universal basic income story. I've got my Twitter set up. That business of letting people buy ticks has messed things up slightly, because it means you see absolute bilge from complete idiots much more prominently. But that's why they've paid, because, you know, the reward is that idiots get prominence denied to people who had their ticks previously by dint of being popular and interesting. But hey-ho, I do understand that. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but there is a narrative out there that the reason why the government and or Boris Johnson are so keen to keep the WhatsApps and the messages that they were exchanging during COVID away from the inquiry is because the messages will reveal that COVID was all a hoax. There are actually people who are allowed near scissors offering up those opinions in public. And thanks to Elon Musk, they're allowed to do so with more prominence than your average professor of virology, for example, or indeed immunology. So I'm sort of just nodding towards Idiot's Corner, because I've just seen that some people are claiming universal basic income is part of a lasso to pull you into total dependence on the state, or that it's part of a World Economic Forum plan to enslave us all. Okay. So be aware that these people walk among us. The saddest thing I've seen, and it wasn't in direct response to me, it was just in response to the story in general, was somebody saying, that's about what I earn every month, so I'll just give up work and do some cash in hand. And you just sort of think, mate, you could literally double your quality of life. A lot of people not understanding what the word universal means, i.e. everybody gets it. So, you know, if it's going to make a difference to you, then, oh, man alive. And a lot of people mistaking the pilot scheme, which has set the sum at £1,600, as being, if you like, a precursor for a broader national rollout at the same level. State pension currently, about £900 a month, is it? So a lot of action in Idiot's Corner this morning in response to this story, but much more interestingly, an awful lot of people dancing around the idea that it does feel increasingly inevitable. Here it is. Here it is. Yeah, Britain trials communism. The UK will now start a trial for the World Economic Forum Universal Basic Income Scheme. All will be paid the same amount. Private property, pets, personal vehicles will be seized and digital currency will be implemented. Now, I used to laugh at stuff like that until I started hearing and seeing relatively similar contributions to public discourse frighteningly close to home. There are people out there who believe that there are conspiracies underway, unspecified conspiracies designed to enslave us all. And the same people that think COVID-19 was a hoax will, for reasons I can't quite pin down yet, but I will there be exactly the same people that are going to be encouraging others to reject universal basic income, even though it's universal and an income. Yeah, down with that sort of thing. Down with money, I guess. Anyway, 12 after 12. Julia's on the line. I was going to move on to a different subject, but Julia has a particular perspective on this story that I thought we should hear. What is it, Julia?
So, thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I am a volunteer in East Finchley with a group called Grange Big Local.
Right.
And so we are the group that, together with Big Local Central Jarrow, have first came up with the idea of doing a pilot together with a group called Basic Income Conversation. And we were formed because we've been given some money from the National Lottery through local trust that can be spent however people want to spend it. So we spent a lot of time on doorsteps asking people if this is something that they wanted us to do. And 70% of them did. Is
that right? 70%? That's a fascinating figure. How did you hit upon the figure of £1,600?
Everybody, we were most interested, we weren't interested in tracking people's spending. We were most interested in the impact it would have on people's health and their mental health and their well-being, because we heard lots of stories about the problems of sanctions, of overpayments, of, having to stay below a benefit threshold, as well as the kind of gig economy, the uncertain incomes, how difficult it is to kind of rent and that kind of thing. So we wanted to know what the difference that made. We know that poverty and health inequalities go together. Everybody knows that. That's been proven.
Yes.
So just giving everyone a little bit more money doesn't show you anything beyond that. You have to take people out of the sanctions regime in order to see what difference that's making, and the thresholds regime, right?
And the rationale then becomes the savings further down the line. The savings to the health budget would be. Presumably would cancel out the cost of universal basic income and then some.
Yeah, so exactly. The idea is that you would be saving a lot of money in health, and you'd be saving a lot of money in means testing, and all the other bits of work that makes the advice you need to get the maximum.
No, I get it. So the research will measure the difference that is made by freeing people from financial stress and poverty, most obviously, and see what. So no one in the scheme is comfortably off then, which is of course what an actual universal basic income would involve. You've selected people who are vulnerable.
So we haven't selected anyone yet.
Can I apply? I don't live in East Finchley.
No, you have to live within the area.
Oh, rats.
But if you live in the area, anybody can apply. But I would say, so for some people in East Finchley, they may not be better off because rents are so high, and coming out of universal credit means you don't get housing benefit. But everyone will get an interview with Citizens Advice Barnet to see what their situation would be.
Of course. So if you're on universal credit, you can't. Okay. Oh, it's a bit more complicated than some of the coverage has allowed, hasn't it?
It is more complicated. Yes. It is a little bit more complicated. But equally, we aren't saying. Anybody can apply, but when I've door knocked, quite a few people have said, we think it's a good idea. We think it would put East Finchley on the map, and today's kind of shown that. And we'll start a conversation and leave a legacy.
Yes.
But we personally wouldn't apply because it wouldn't really have that much impact for us. So
East Finchley is quite a wealthy area. I know these things are generalisations, but there are poorer parts of town, I think it's fair to say.
I think that's
not the
true.
point.
Although at the point that it's not all of East Finchley, and the section that we cover, the bit that we cover, includes mostly social housing estates.
Okay.
So it's not all social housing estates, but it's a significant amount.
Is it a misnomer then to call it a universal basic income? I appreciate it's a pilot, but and it is a tiny sample of people, but it's not. You're measuring the impact that something like this would have upon the most vulnerable people, potentially, aren't you? You're not measuring the impact that it's going to have on people who are. So, for example, we did mortgages in the first hour, Julia. I don't know if you were listening. And I'm speaking to people with quite high take-home pay, but the combination of interest rates and the cost of living mean that some of them are now struggling to get by on £400 a week in the first instance for a family of three. But they're on quite high take-home pay. So they're not at this stage the people that the pilot will be looking at. They're going to be looking at people a little bit further down the ladder.
So everyone can apply. Who lives in the area can apply to be part of it. We want the group, as far as possible, to look like the area. Oh, okay. So there will be a diverse intake. It will be diverse as far as it can be. But it's
depends who applies.
It kind of depends who applies.
Well, you're going to be inundated now, aren't you? After all this coverage, have you been surprised by the scale of the coverage or not? Just out of interest.
Oh, absolutely. I had no idea because, you go and have conversations and say, have you ever heard of this? And people say, no.
Well, they have now.
They have now, yeah. And I mean, I guess a lot of the conversation has been about that security net, but I also think of it as a springboard. So it's a chance to take that low-paid internship or to go to university or to start your own business and have a fallback position.
Yeah, it mitigates risk, doesn't it?
Yeah, and, middle-class families have that.
They do indeed.
They already have it. So I do see it as a kind of equalizer in terms of that and a way of releasing, people being entrepreneurs. But it's... We'll see.
We will see. Well, just to add to your door knocking statistics, the consensus here in the studio has very much been that there is an inevitability to some form of universal basic income popping up sooner rather than later. So we shall all wait and see with great interest, Julia. So do I have to wait 2 years now before you come back on the programme? Well, keep in touch.
A tiny bit. Yeah, I'll keep in touch.
You may be able to give us updates or insights. I hope so. Thank you so much for ringing in as well. It was very, very helpful. 20 minutes after 12 is the time. It's 22 minutes after 12. I saw a story at the weekend about female crash test dummies. Now, what does that make you think of? This is a test, actually, of how closely you pay attention to my burblings on the programme, or indeed to my podcast series. It made me think of Caroline Criado Perez, the author of Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men, one of the most arresting books I've ever read. By some distance, actually. I mean, it is absolutely stunning how the world is moulded to masculinity. And crash test dummies are a wonderful example. If you only use crash test dummies based upon male physiognomy, then you are putting women at a huge disadvantage when you're trying to make cars safer. Everything from your weight to where the steering wheel would or the airbag would hit your body, or the trajectory at which you might go out of the window. I just crash test dummies were one of the most memorable examples she provided in that book, and there are millions. Well, not millions, but loads. And I saw this weekend that they've brought in, quite a few years after the book was published, that they are now bringing in crash test dummies based upon the female body, which will, of course, help everybody be safer. They won't now exclude male data. They will just make a car safer for everybody rather than just for people whose bodies... Well, the more your body was similar to the crash test dummy that they were using, the safer you would become. So use lots of different crash test dummies and you get a safer car. And what that book taught me was something incredible and something embarrassing as well, because I remember once wandering through a square in Edinburgh, and one of my children asked me why all the statues were of men, Big fans of statues in our house and history in general, and even bigger fans of more history and new history and more accurate history perhaps than the history that some of us were taught when we were at school. We're big fans of facts. When we go to a National Trust house, we like nothing more, for example, than to learn more about the family that built the house and even perhaps where their money came from, although I fully appreciate that can absolutely terrify some people, the idea of learning more about the factual history of the people that built the house that you're visiting. For example, if the money had come from, I don't know, strawberry farming or slavery, some people are absolutely terrified. Why are they attacking our history? Why are they attacking our values? Terrified of learning more history. They prefer something called British values, which is a little bit like sovereignty. Absolutely impossible to define, but crucially important to protecting unspecified valuable things. So, and one of my children said to me, why are all the statues of men? And I caught myself saying, well, because throughout history, men have achieved a lot more than women. Now, technically, there might be some truth in that, as in, you know, prime ministers and admirals and people what have won wars or made amazing discoveries. But the subtext of the way that I was saying it was daft, you know, as if that had been a result of, I don't know, innate ability or something like that. What you could have said was the world is made in such a way that it is a hell of a lot easier for men, even incredible men, to achieve incredible things than it is for women. So, you know, the in the same way that until relatively recently, you couldn't get a top job without being a bloke. The go back 100 years or 200 years, there's no earthly way you would have been, you know, going, I nearly said going into space. Obviously, no one was going into space 200 years ago, but you wouldn't have been. Even Crick and Watson were helped by a woman, weren't they? Whose name never really appears in the front line of the coverage, and you can pick sort of the odd Marie Curie or so. But anyway, you take my point. The world was framed in such a way that men were going to rise to positions of prominence in a way that women couldn't. I always think of that book. I always think of that moment in Edinburgh when I read stories like this one today. It's going to surprise you slightly where I'm going with this, given that slightly highfalutin introduction, but we're going to talk about the contraceptive pill, because I think it's linked to what I've just told you. I think that if men could get pregnant, then the side effects of the contraceptive pill would have been dealt with by science decades ago. I really do. I checked something before I came on air this morning. Do you know, and with the caveat that obviously the medical impact of breast implants is huge. Women who've had mastectomies able to have their breasts rebuilt. But I just thought I'd check whether breast implants were invented by a man or a woman. And I bet myself it's a man. I bet you that's a man that's decided to, you know, research how he can make women's boobs bigger. With the medical caveat, I accept that, but that is not the motivation of the people that invented it, as far as I can tell. And then I thought about Viagra. Not for the obvious reasons, not yet at least, but I thought about Viagra, and I thought, I wonder how much money and research went into Viagra. I wonder how much scientific research went into Viagra, how much effort went into that. And whether or not it is in any way comparable to looking at what Davina McCall, who's becoming a pretty special activist in this arena, the lack of funding for women's health. Davina McCall has described as a massive black hole when it comes into research into the side effects of the pill. Sadly, there is so little research done into women's health, and it means that we're scrabbling around for science-based evidence to do with contraception. I haven't got any sums in front of me. I've got absolutely no figures, statistics or evidence. I could almost be a Brexiteer, couldn't I? It must have felt great, that, being invited onto the telly to spout utter gibberish without being required to produce any proof or evidence or statistical support for your position. So I've got none of that in front of me, but I am, at this point in proceedings, I am supremely confident that more money was spent bringing Viagra to the market than has been spent on trying to make contraceptive pills better for women, trying to reduce the side effects, trying to mitigate some of the harms that they can do. There have been 20 to 25 industry-funded clinical contraceptive trials between 2017 and 2020, looking mostly at incremental changes to existing hormonal products. I haven't got the numbers for Viagra, but there were in the same period, or in 1 year alone, there were 3,100 trials for cancer drugs, 600 for cardiovascular medication, and 140 for treatments for eye disorders. So I don't want a hierarchy. Obviously, cancer is a killer, and contraception, or at least the issues it addresses, is not. But you can see the point. Pharmaceutical companies spend about 2% of their revenue on research and development, compared with about 20% on new products. It's a fascinating program coming up on telly. But this is what I want to know about. I first had the... don't ring me about Viagra, lads. Seriously. No, we discovered by accident, was it, or something like that? But I don't know. That's why we should have concentrated on breast implants. But I just want to talk about contraceptive pills now, okay? So the question that I've got for you is this. The first time I had this moment on air was with the menopause. And I was not, at the time, my wife was not of an age where the menopause had become relevant. And I, as a normal bloke, had absolutely no idea. Absolutely no idea. So Viagra was originally designed as a heart drug or a blood pressure medication, and the impact that it had upon your tackle was an unexpected side effect. So park that comparison and focus instead upon the other stuff that we mentioned, the cardiovascular research, the cancer research, the eye disorders, all of that. And when we talked about the menopause, I realised, to my shock and shame, that there is an almost taboo surrounding women's health issues. I don't fully understand why. I genuinely don't fully understand why. I mean, it can't be easily explainable, but you would think that if half the population is susceptible to something, some people have very easy menopauses, but what I discovered that day, some years ago now, was that some people have an absolute nightmare. You would have thought that if half the population was susceptible to something, whether it is a horrible menopause or whether it is awful side effects with the contraceptive pill, then there would be a genuine mission, a genuine desire to fix it. And there just isn't. This is the point that Davina McCall makes. So let's have a look at what it's like. A survey of about 4,000 women found that about 77% experienced side effects. You're looking at headaches, depression, lowered mood, lowered sex drive. About a third stopped taking it as a result. So it's a conversation we've never had on the radio before. And as I get older, they become rarer and rarer. But the two questions, there's the obvious one, which is, how bad is it? How badly has it affected your life? 0345 6060 973. And then there's the second question, which I really want you to have a crack at. Because if this was men, if this was something that was happening to men, science would have sorted it out decades ago. I genuinely believe that. So why do you think, and I'll take answers from anywhere on this, it could be from a position of deep understanding, or it could be from a position like me of essential speculation, but why has something as significant and as prevalent as the contraceptive pill not been more robustly researched to make it a happier and safer experience for millions of women? Why do you think that is? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. So question number one, go on, shockers. Shock the average bloke listening to this programme who thinks, oh, it's all right, she's on the pill. Everywhere. Shockers with insights into what a profound impact it can have upon a woman's health. 0345 6060 973. And then for the pseudo-intellectuals among us, like myself, what is the sort of social rationale for the fact that there is a pitifully small amount of research into women's health in general, but this particular area in particular? Hit the numbers now. You will get through. Probably not going to talk to blokes in the first instance, Michael, in Wimbledon, if that's all right with you. Just think, in the first instance at least, the experience of taking the contraceptive pill is unlikely to be something you're going to be able to help us with. 33 minutes after 12 is the time. Amelia Cox has your headlines. It is 36 minutes after 12, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Don't forget, you've got to be careful with coverage of court cases involving newspapers or court cases involving the media. Fair play to Tristan Kirk of the Evening Standard, the courts correspondent of the London Evening Standard, who says, Prince Harry getting heat today for not coming to court, potentially wasting court time. Worth noting for balance that vast numbers of Mirror journalists who wrote the stories at the centre of the case will not be coming to court at all. But still, the judge expressing surprise at Prince Harry's failure to turn up. Also, going to be some astonishing allegations made in the course of those cases, but the level of reporting that they receive in many ways is going to be at least as interesting as what is reported. Anyway, 12:36 is the time. Davina McCall attacks research black hole on the pill. Why do you think the contraceptive pill needs more research, i.e. what has it done to you? And second question, why? Why is women's health, even now in 2023, lagging so far behind men's health in so many ways? Menopause was, I think when we did that as a phone-in, it had a lot to do with male doctors not knowing much about it. So a woman would turn up and the doctor just wouldn't have the, I don't know what it would be, the skill set, the knowledge base to be of help. So you'd end up either being patronised or dismissed. I don't know whether that would be the same here. We'll find out. Sarah's in Clapham. Sarah, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Love your show.
Thank you. What's on your mind?
So I basically wanted to talk about my experience. So I was pills from a young age. I was about 15, and I took the pill for so many years, but the side effects became so bad that I went to move to non-hormonal contraception.
How did you know that the... Sorry to interrupt, but I remember I'm coming at this from a position of considerable ignorance. How did you know that the stuff that was happening to you, or how did you find out that the stuff that was happening to you was a consequence of the contraceptive pill, if you see what I mean, a side effect?
Yeah, of course. So it started affecting me later in life, in my late 20s, more so than it did when I was between 15 and 20, say. And I'd taken breaks on and off it.
Okay.
And it was basically just talking to my friends. I was in a relationship and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't feel good. I feel really down. And we'd managed to work out between us that we all felt similar ways. And it was all when we'd gone back on the pill from...
Oh, how interesting.
From breaks when we'd not been on it. So I thought, okay, I'll try it out. And I stopped taking it. And my sister as well had the same issue. And she stopped taking it completely because it was having a very similar effect on her. And I think that's a really good question, James, so thank you for asking. So, again, with my group of friends, we started to really discuss contraception, and that's something that is only a later conversation. I wasn't having these conversations with my friends 10 years ago. It's still very new.
Why is that then, do you think?
I don't know. I think maybe it was taboo. Maybe it was just something you didn't talk about. I mean, the conversations we have about everything now are so different to what we were having 10 years ago. I mean, I'm not even sure if this would have been a topic 10 years ago.
No, nor am I. And that's why Davina's doing such great work, isn't it? By bringing it smack into the spotlight. Just briefly, if you could, we're talking about depression. We're talking about mood-related side effects mostly, are we?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Well, on the pill it was, but something I really wanted to quickly bring in as well is it's not just hormonal contraception. I switched to a non-hormonal, the copper coil, which I love because it's long-term. I've got no chance. Well, I obviously have like a 0.01% of getting pregnant on it. But I still get side effects. My periods are much heavier. They're much more painful. About 3 out of 4 weeks of the month, I'm in pain. There's risk of endometriosis. You can get copper toxicity in your body from a buildup of copper. So whilst the research around the pill is really important, I think all contraceptive methods are really important because there's no one shining star.
No, I mean, you're right. That's just that's a flaw in my introduction. I mean, we're talking about clinical contraceptive trials, not specifically about the contraceptive pill. That was me probably just demonstrating my own ignorance on the subject. Although in the show that's out on Thursday, Davina she has a coil fitted on camera, a hormonal coil on camera in order to address the issues of potential pain.
And still, on that one, they don't offer you any pain method other than they tell you to take a paracetamol, and that's proper. I wonder if she's going to bring that up because they actually open your cervix, and that's I've never felt a pain like it, and there's no preparation other than take a paracetamol 20 minutes beforehand. I can't help thinking that if a man was being routinely exposed to that level of pain, there'd probably be different
mitigations in place?
Well, I don't have any evidence
Nor
on this,
do
but
I.
I'd heard a story about a man being offered pain relief for an ultrasound on his scrotum. So, I mean, I can't validate that, but if that's true, it does show a real disparity there.
Yeah. Finally, and this isn't what you rang in to do, so you don't have to. Why do you think that is? I mean, we've touched upon the 10-year change in conversation between you and your friends, but why would the medical establishment be so unsympathetic, perhaps for want of a better word, to female medical issues as opposed to other ones?
Well, it could be that historically, maybe it's been a male-dominated industry. I can't validate that. I've not got the facts. But also, in terms
none
of
us have got the facts. That's why it's an interesting phone-in.
But I'd say in terms of the contraceptives, aside from all the side effects, they're doing what they intend to do.
So
really
what is the priority?
I'm in pain, I'm not getting pregnant, and that's what it's designed to do. So I'm sorry, it hurts, but it's doing what it's meant to.
Yeah, and also you're taking full responsibility for your own fertility, despite the fact that mine as a man is just as likely to impact or create a child as yours is. That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that. It works. Well, yeah, but it could be bad. Doesn't matter. It works. Subconsciously or consciously. I think that Sarah's nailed something down there. 12:42 is the time. Lou's in Gateshead. Lou, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I just want to say thank you so much for having this conversation. It's so important.
It is, isn't it? I hadn't realised how important it was, to be honest.
Yeah, it really, really is important. No doubt your switchboard will be lighting up all over the place now. But I'm a community midwife, so I have a professional opinion on this and a personal opinion. I've had children. I've been on the pill. I was on the pill from the age of 17. Had a long time on the pill. Didn't really have any issues like Sarah before me, until I was in my 20s, and then had mood swings, really periods of low mood.
Yeah.
Terrible. Just
do we know why that
periods.
is? Do we know why it can be fine for a decade and then suddenly kick in? Have we got any ideas on that?
No, I don't. I've got no. There's no research.
Well, that's kind of the point, isn't it?
That is the point. So, but I then moved to the hormonal coil, the Mirena coil, it's known as.
Yes.
And I'd had a daughter by this point, but this was incredibly painful.
I'm getting a lot of messages saying this.
Yeah, and I know women who've had what's called as a vasovagal episode, where they literally faint from the pain.
Good God.
And because they're clamping open your cervix to put this little thing in the lower segment of your uterus, and to have it removed, mine actually came loose and lodged into my cervix and it caused heavy bleeding and terrible abdominal pain. So it had to be removed in the same way. So it's just, I know why. And I'm by no means a screaming feminist. It does a job, and I believe, like Sarah does, that because it works, why put more research into it? Because it's just women having the pain. It does what it needs to do. It stops unwanted pregnancies, in the most part.
Yes.
But why put more research into it? But Davina, so Davina's research into menopause.
It's been game changing, hasn't it?
Huge. I mean, I'm kind of moving into that now, and I'm moved by Canadian oncologist who's amazing, absolutely amazing, and really famous. And she talks about all of the original research on menopause was all by men, and it was all to do with women's madness.
Yeah.
So women
coming at
were,
it from completely the wrong end of the telescope, really.
Yeah. Women were mad for having all of these symptoms and these mood swings, and it just goes back to that thing of, well, if it doesn't affect me, then
that's
why?
It, isn't it? That's it. And your fertility affects me only insofar as I don't want you to get pregnant if we have sex. And so the minute that's sorted, then the pressure comes off the need for medical research. Thank you, Lou. Phone line just went a little bit funny at the end, so I'm just knocking it on the head there, but I don't know the one bit of the programme, and I can only go on the report in the Times today that may not please you, because an awful lot of women getting in touch to talk about the pain, the unbearable pain of the fainting pain, as Lou describes it, of having these coils fitted. Is the part of Davina's programme actually addresses that from a slightly different angle. She says, I'm not saying it's the holy grail and it won't be right for everyone, but for me, 10 minutes of discomfort is a small price to pay for 5 years of no periods and the convenience of not having to remember to take something every day. Quite a lot of my correspondents describing it in rather stronger terms than 10 minutes of discomfort. But that's the point about these conversations, that until you start having them, You don't know anything. .49 is the time. I just slightly. I hope it's a slightly tongue-in-cheek critique. Let me make sure I find it. Are there any women out there who want to talk about their experiences with the pill, stroke the menopause? Is surely, James, no different from? Are there any elderly people out there feeling a bit poorly? A tweet that almost certainly has come from a bloke. I presume you sent that before you heard some of the contributions. The point is that people never get the chance to talk about this. And the joke about asking if there's anybody old out there feeling poorly is that the older we get, the more we talk constantly about how poorly we feel. So hopefully you heard callers saying that they wouldn't even have spoken to their friends about this 10 years ago. If you've ever met any elderly people, all they ever talk to their friends about is aches and pains. That's a ludicrous generalisation just to highlight the absurdity of your tweet, which I hope was a joke, but it was not quite. I'll keep you out of Idiot's Corner for now, but I'm not making any promises. 12:50 is the time. Lisa's in Chelmsford. Lisa, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Lisa.
It's a bit of a convoluted story. So basically, I'm actually celiac. I know it starts off strangely, but I've been trying to get hold of the doctors because I thought I was, or I still believe I am, perimenopausal.
Yes.
To put that into context, it's a case of that when I was having my periods, I literally was flooding. It was a case of that it was going through my trousers within half an hour. It was like hemorrhaging.
Oof.
So
God.
I tried to get hold of the doctors, couldn't get hold of the doctors. But luckily for me, I'm celiac, so I have a yearly checkup with the gastroenterologist, which includes a blood test.
Yeah.
And obviously I also spoke to him and explained to him what was happening. And my blood test came back to show that I was extremely deficient of iron and various other things.
Right.
And so he actually ended up writing a letter to my doctor to say that you need to see this lady. So if it hadn't been for him, I would still be doing the 200, 300, 400 phone calls a morning trying to get through.
Really?
It's ridiculous. Oh, it's absolutely ridiculous. I've actually had 2 phones on the go trying to get through my doctors. They have an online system.
Right.
And the last time I looked, they have no appointments, and that's till the end of July. So it's really
such a lottery because I got an appointment in minutes the other day with my GP, NHS GP. It is complete lottery, isn't it?
Yeah, completely.
I feel bad now because I wasn't in anything like as much bother as you are.
Well, fortunately, obviously my GP did see me then.
Yes.
They rang me up, and said, "Oh, we told her to see you."
Yes.
Brilliant. And went in. The first thing was she was quite dismissive of it being perimenopausal.
Okay.
And I suppose I should have read a bit more of Davina's stuff to be a little bit more forthright. But she put me onto a tablet, this is 3 months ago, called Sorel, which is a mini pill. So it only has, I think, it's progesterone in it.
Right.
Which was obviously, what her words were, was to alleviate the bleeding. And it was a case of that then my iron levels hopefully should go higher, and they put me on a course of iron and everything. Unfortunately, she said there might be a little bit of bleeding in between. I bleed every day. And then I still get a massive period. So
and you've got no idea what's going on then?
I have absolutely no...
And you can't get back to the doctors?
No. I tried again this morning. And it's a case of that, I've had mood swings. There are days when, You actually have to force yourself to get up to go to work, force myself to get my son, trying to be smiley for my husband and my son when literally all I want to do is just curl up in my bed.
Of course.
And it's a case of, the only thing I will say is that literally my last tablet is today, and I'm just at the point where I'm thinking I'm not going to take it because
it hasn't made anything better, has it?
No, exactly.
Oh gosh.
It's not very good at all, really, and I think that it's highlighting the issues that obviously I've had in this area to get a GP's appointment. Also, the fact that there's still. And it was a lady.
You probably need you need a referral to a gynecologist. I would have thought, wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, fortunately for me,
Yeah.
I am very fortunate. I do have work health insurance.
Right.
So they have a doctor line thing. So I'm actually thinking to myself, I'm just going to cut out the NHS.
Just do it now. Do it now.
Yeah.
Do it today.
Yeah.
What's the problem? Why haven't you done it? I'm sorry, that's none of my business. But I really think I would personally, if it's not going to be me with the periods, but if it was my wife, I'd be moving heaven and earth to get seen.
It's
ASAP.
ridiculous. It's almost a sort of a situation where you're kind of still trying to trust the old process. You're still trying to trust back. And I've never used this service that I've got, and I am really fortunate. I understand that.
Yeah. I was going to do that, and I thought it's not appropriate to point out the politics because I think, but you've done it now, so I can. I think that's what's going to happen increasingly is that people up against the difficulties of being seen and getting appointments in this understaffed, under-resourced, underfunded NHS will increasingly start thinking like you do, and it's going to happen incrementally, isn't it? It's not going to be some big policy announcement. We're just going to change our way of doing things because of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. But look, there's a time for politics, and this isn't it. You've got to get seen by anyone, I would have thought, Lisa, seriously. So call in the work insurance, get it sorted. And I'm no expert. Julie suggests that a referral to a gynecologist should be the first idea. But, if nothing else, you prove how ridiculous this is. Even when you got seen, it wasn't much help, partly because of either a lack of interest in these sort of issues from the medical establishment, even if the doctor happens to be a woman, or because of a more systemic, a more institutional bias, I guess you'd have to call it. Thank you, Lisa. I really, really hope things get better soon. Lucy's in Nottingham. Lucy, what would you like to say?
James, thank you so much for having this conversation.
Well, it is Davina McCall. I feel I'm getting all this credit and gratitude.
Davina's an absolute hero,
yes.
But you as a man talking about bleeding and pills and things, like not many men are comfortable to have those discussions.
We're all works in progress, aren't we, Lucy? We're all trying to improve.
We are, but the more we talk, the less of a taboo it is and the less embarrassing, and then hopefully the more life can get better for people, because it does impact your day-to-day life massively if you've not got the right contraception, and a lot of it is trial and error. And I've just told your producer a horror story about my experience with the copper coil disintegrating in my body after 8 years. Yes, but there are no answers as to whether there's still little pieces of copper floating around my body.
Well, this is, it's horrible for you, but it's illustrative for everybody else of...
It really is.
A lack of research, a lack of engagement with
completely. Like I ended up pulling it out myself because I just kept being told, it's in the right place, we've scanned it, it's where it should be, and I knew it wasn't right. I knew something was wrong, so I pulled it out myself, and there was no copper left on it at all. So I don't know if you know what a copper coil looks like. It's like a little plastic T-shape, and then the copper's wrapped all the way around it, like in a coil shape, like a spiral. And I compared it to a picture of like before and after, and it was quite alarming, to be honest.
Have you told anyone? Have you been to the doctors?
Yeah.
What do they say?
I took it after I pulled it out. I took it to my gynecology appointment, and then I took it back to the place, the sexual health clinic where I had it fitted.
Right.
And they were just like, do you want another one put in it? And I was like, absolutely not.
Not really, thanks.
No.
What was it? Was it defective, or were you? What?
They just didn't say. Like I checked, made sure, because you can get a 5-year copper coil or a 10-year one. Mine was a 10-year one, and I had it in for 8 years.
Right. So it should have been fine.
One doctor just said maybe it had come down further than it should have been. So the pH balance is different in different parts of you.
and I don't want to put words into your mouth, but if there was an equivalent experience for a bloke, I can't help thinking...
Why is there not an equivalent experience for a bloke yet? Me and my friend were having this conversation at the weekend, like...
Well, I know the answer to this.
How is there not?
They were looking into contraceptive pills for men.
But the side effects...
But the side effects were too unpleasant, so you lot can carry on taking them. Thank you very much. It is nuts, isn't it? I wish that was a joke, but it's not. Also, there's men won't remember. You can't expect men to take responsibility for something like that.
They can remember how to have sex, though, can't they? So it's not that hard to remember.
No.
Yeah.
You look after yourself, Lucy. Thank you. Good Lord, that was quite the revelation for me, and something to which no doubt we will return. I'm done for the day, though. If you want to catch up on any of the show that you... I mean, just to stress, the producer thinks I should reiterate that I'm not a medical professional. She obviously holds you in much lower regard than I do. I'm supremely confident that you're already well aware of that. But if there is any doubt out there, I have the qualifications of a penguin when it comes to matters medical. Do seek medical advice if any of these issues are relevant to you. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Global Player, where you can also rewind live radio and find all of LBC's shows to catch up on, as well as the world's biggest podcast. And my podcast with Mark Steele got a heck of a lot of love over the weekend. I think because I was too busy sitting there laughing, I hadn't realised how objectively funny it would be. It's one of those podcasts where you could happily remove my contributions completely, and it would suffer not a jot. Anyway, Rewind Live Radio on Global Player. Download it for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick back in the house at 4 and Sheila Fogarty back in the house right now.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you very much, James.
Welcome back.
Thank you, 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 James.
Welcome back.
Thank you,
Welcome back.